Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting movie on what if Naruto was the forgotten sage god, the SSS-Rank Adventu. RER above all gods, Naruto x Freya, DanMachi. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Masked Sage. Darkness pulsed beneath Orario like a wounded heart. In the 57th floor of the dungeon, the expedition from the Loki Familia had expected danger. They had prepared for it, trained for it, equipped themselves for every known threat that lurked in these depths. What they hadn't expected was impossibility itself, monsters spawning not from walls but from thin air. Creatures with patterns of attack they'd never documented, and most disturbing of all, coordinated movements suggesting something beyond animal instinct. Ace Wallenstein, the Sword Princess, cut tea. Her 15th violas in as many minutes, golden hair whipping around her face as she spun to face yet another wave. Blood streaked her armor, some of it her own. Around her, the elite members of her familia fought with increasingly desperate intensity. Finn, this isn't normal spawning behavior. She called to the Palom commander who stood at the center of their defensive formation, his pair moving with precision despite the chaos. I know. The diminutive leader's usually calm face showed rare strain. Something's triggering a floor-wide spawning event. We need to retreat. Now. Words had barely left his mouth when the stone beneath their feet began to vibrate. Cracks spread across the floor like spiderwebs, glowing with an ominous crimson light that none of them had ever seen in their combined centuries of dungeon exploration. What is that? Chiona, one of the Amazon twins, backed away from the growing fissure, her twin swords raised defensively. No one answered because no one knew. This was beyond their experience, beyond even the oldest records kept by the guild. The crimson light erupted upward, and with it came a roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the world. The adventurers covered their ears as the sound threatened to rupture their eardrums, falling to their knees as the pressure wave hit them. When they could see again, they faced Summit. Hing that shouldn't exist. A monster easily 3 times the size of a regular floor boss, with multiple heads sprouting from a body covered in scales that shifted color like oil on water. Each of its in heads resembled different creatures: dragon, serpent, wolf, lion, and others less identifiable. Most terrifying of all, in the center of its chest pulsed a core that looked like a miniature sun, casting that blood-red light throughout the chamber. Riveria, what is that thing? Finn shouted to the high elf mage who stood frozen, her spell forgotten on her lips. I don't know. The Admus, scion from their most knowledgeable member, sent ice through their veins. It doesn't match any documented species. It shouldn't be possible. The creature's central head, the draconic one, opened its maw and began gathering energy. The air around it distorting with heat. Move. Finn's command galvanized them, but they all knew they wouldn't be fast enough. The chamber was too large, the exits too far. They were about to witness firsthand what happened when Orario lost a top-tier expedition. The monster released its breath attack, a beam of concentrated energy that would vaporize anything in its path. The adventurers braced for an end they couldn't escape. It never came. A flash of gold intercepted the beam, splitting it into harmless fragments that dissipated against the chamber walls. Here there had been empty space, now stood a figure wrapped in a swirling cloak the color of dawn. A porcelain mask shaped like a fox concealed the newcomer's face, marked with red lines and symbols none of them recognized. The impossible seems to be happening with increasing frequency these days, the masked figure said, his voice carrying easily despite the chaos. He stood between the expedition and the abomination, completely at ease, as if he'd merely stumbled upon an interesting specimen rather than a world-ending threat. Who? Ace began, but her question died as the stranger moved. One moment he was standing still. The next, he was 20 feet in the air, his body twisting with inhuman grace as the monster's multiple heads struck at him simultaneously. He evaded each attack with minimal movement, his cloak fluttering around him like wings. When one head came too close, he simply touched it with his palm, a gentle gesture that somehow sent the massive appendage crashing into the ground with bone-shattering force. You shouldn't be awake yet, the masked man addressed the creature as if scolding a child who'd left their bed too early. Someone's been tampering with things best left dormant. The monster responded with a roar from all 9 mouths simultaneously, the combined sound creating visible distortions in the air. The masked figure remained unmoved, the edges of his cloak not even rippling in the sonic assault. I see. You're not interested in conversation. He sighed, the sound somehow audible even through the cacophony. Very well, then. He raised his right hand, and for the first time, the expedition members noticed the intricate patterns tattooed across his exposed skin, symbols that seemed to shift and change as they watched, as if alive on his flesh. The air around him began to shimmer with golden energy that reminded A's of sunlight filtering through autumn leaves. I apologize for what I must do, the stranger said to the creature, genuine regret coloring his tone. You are merely a symptom, not the disease. Nevertheless, he formed a series of hand signs too fast for even A's enhanced perception to follow. The golden energy coalesced around him, taking shape as 9 spectral tails that waved behind him like banners. Sage art. Purifying seal. The masked man thrust his palm forward, and reality itself seemed to bend around the point of contact. The golden energy expanded outward in a complex latticework of symbols and lines that enveloped the monster entirely. The creature thrashed against the forming seal, but each move became more sluggish as the golden network tightened. Within seconds, the monstrous entity was completely encased in a cocoon of light. The masked man made one final gesture, fingers pinching Tog, ether as if grasping an invisible thread, and the entire construct compressed inward. The light intensified to a blinding flash that forced everyone to shield their eyes. When they could see again, the monster was gone. In its place floated a small crystal sphere that pulsed with diminishing crimson light. The masked figure plucked it from the air and tucked it into a pouch at his belt. Silence filled the chamber. The expeditionary force stared at their unexpected savior, weapons still raised but uncertainty plain on their faces. Even Finn, their unflappable leader, seemed at a loss. The masked man turned to them, his porcelain fox face revealing nothing of his thoughts. You should return to the surface, he said simply. This floor will be unstable for several days after that manifestation. Finn was the first to recover his composure. Thank you for your assistance, he said formally, though his grip on his spear hadn't relaxed. May I ask your name? The masked figure tilted his head slightly, considering. Names have power, he replied after a moment. But some call me the sage. A's stepped forward, her golden eyes intense. That technique. I've never seen magic like that before. It isn't magic, precisely. The sage's voice carried a hint of amusement. At least, not as you understand it. Are you an adventurer? Chiona asked bluntly. Which familia do you belong to? The mask turned toward her. I walk my own path. Impossible, Riveria interjected. Every adventurer requires a god's blessing to develop abilities. And yet, here I stand. The sage Ge stirred around at the aftermath of his intervention. Impossibility seems to be the theme of the day. Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled again, a less violent aftershock of the previous event. Time grows short, the sage said. You should go. Now. Finn nodded sharply. Fall back to the upper floors, he ordered his team. Standard retreat formation. As the adventurers began their withdrawal, A's lingered, her eyes still fixed on the mysterious figure. Will we see you again? The masked man's response was cryptic. When the balance tips, I appear. It seems to be tipping rather frequently of late. Then he added, more softly, safe journey, Sword Princess. Before A's could ask how he knew her title, the sage brought his hands together in an unfamiliar sign. The air rippled around him, and he vanished. Not with the flash of teleportation magic, but as if he'd simply stepped sideways out of reality itself. High above the city of Orario, perched atop a tower She offered an unrivaled view of the sprawling metropolis below. A woman of unearthly beauty watched the commotion at the Babel Tower, the massive structure that served as both the guild's headquarters and the sealed entrance to the dungeon's upper floors. Emergency teams rushed in and out as wounded adventurers from the Loki expedition were brought to the surface. Freya's silver hair danced in the breeze as she leaned forward, her perfect features animated with unusual interest. Around her, the city gleamed in the late afternoon sun, its architecture a blend of ancient stone and magical innovation. Airships drifted between taller structures, carrying goods and passengers above the bustling streets. The various districts spread out like a patchwork quilt, the opulent northwest where gods and wealthy mortals dwelled. The industrial east with its forges and workshops, the commercial heart with its markets and guildhalls, and the seedier south where those on society's margins eked out their existence. All of it paled in comparison to what had captured her attention. "My lady," a deep voice spoke from behind her. Freya didn't turn as her most loyal follower, Ottar, joined her at the parapet. The Boaz warrior stood silently, waiting for her to acknowledge him. "Did you feel it, Ottar?" she asked finally, her melodic voice carrying an edge of excitement that her familia members rarely heard. "That pulse of power from below." "Yes, my lady." The dungeon experienced some kind of anomaly. "The guild is in chaos." Freya's perfect lips curved into a smile. "Not the anomaly. The response to it." She turned to face her captain, her silver eyes gleaming with an emotion he couldn't quite place. "There was a soul down there, Ottar. A soul unlike any I've ever seen." This gave the stoic warrior pause. Freya, goddess of beauty and desire, could see directly into the souls of mortals. In her thousands of years of existence, she had witnessed countless souls, from the dimmest sparks to the most brilliant flames. For something to impress her this way was unprecedented. "What manner of soul, my lady?" "Golden," she breathed, her expression almost rapturous. "Not merely bright, but ancient. Layered, as if it contained multitudes." She paced along the edge of the tower, her white dress flowing around her like liquid silver. It appeared suddenly, blazed like a sun for mere minutes, then vanished again. Ottar's brow furrowed. "A god, one who has descended to the lower world." "No." Freya shook her head decisively. "Divine souls have a particular resonance. This was something else entirely." She stopped pacing and stared out over the city once more. "I want to know who it belongs to." The finality in her tone told Ottar that a new obsession had taken hold of his goddess. He had seen this before, Freya's desire to possess exceptional souls, to consume their brilliance until nothing remained. It invariably ended in tragedy for the unfortunate object of her attention. "I will gather information about the incident," he promised with a bow. "Do so discreetly," Freya instructed. "Whatever owns that soul has remained hidden for a reason. I want to discover it before others realize its significance." Ottar nodded and retreated, leaving Freya alone with her thoughts. The goddess lifted a hand to her chest, feeling an unfamiliar sensation stirring there, not the usual predatory hunger that exceptional souls awakened in her, but something more complex. Almost like recognition. "Who are you?" she whispered to the horizon. "And why do I feel as though I should know you already?" The sun set over Orario's western wall, painting the white stone of the city's buildings in hues of amber and gold. In a modest apartment above a bookshop in the quieter academic district, far from the grandeur of the divine residences, a man with bright blonde hair sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed in meditation. Naruto Uzumaki's breathing remained steady as he processed the aftermath of his intervention in the dungeon. The sealed crystal rested on a small cushion before him, its crimson pulsations now reduced to occasional flickers. Around his apartment, shelves overflowed with ancient texts, peculiar artifacts, and specimens preserved in jars of various sizes. Maps covered one wall entirely, marking locations across the world with notations in multiple languages and cryptic symbols. A simple bed occupied one corner, rarely used. A kitchenette contained enough implements to prepare basic meals, though the plants growing in containers along the windowsill suggested more sophisticated culinary interests than the instant ramen packages stacked beside the stove. The entire space spoke of a mind constantly working, constantly searching, with little concern for conventional comfort. Naruto opened his eyes, startlingly blue and far older than his youthful face suggested, and regarded the crystal with a frown. "You shouldn't exist in this form," he murmured to it. "Something is accelerating the process." He rose fluidly to his feet and crossed to a wooden chest banded with metal bearing unfamiliar symbols. From it, he withdrew a cloth wave with golden threads that caught the light strangely, seeming to bend it rather than reflect it. He wrapped the crystal carefully, its glow immediately dampened upon contact with the fabric. A sharp knock at his door interrupted his contemplation. Naruto stilled, senses extending outward. He hadn't been expecting visitors, and few people knew of this particular residence. He kept several throughout the city, changing locations frequently to avoid attention. This one was relatively new. Another knock, more insistent. "I know you're in there," called a female voice, accented with the formal cadence of the eastern lands. "The spirits led me to this door. They do not make mistakes." Naruto's eyebrows rose. Silently, he placed the wrapped crystal back in the chest and secured it. Then, with casual grace that belied his readiness, he opened the door. The woman on his threshold was striking, not with the overwhelming divine beauty of Freya, but with the disciplined poise of a blade forged to perfection. Her raven hair was gathered in an elaborate style held with ornamental pins that Naruto recognized as disguised weapons. She wore traditional Eastern garb, a layered kimono in shades of crimson and white that somehow didn't impede her movement. At her hip hung a katana in a black lacquered sheath decorated with gold inlay depicting 9 foxes chasing each other in an endless circle. Most arresting were her eyes, pale lavender without pupils, reminiscent of the Hyuga clan from a life he sometimes struggled to remember clearly. "Interesting," Naruto said, leaning against the doorframe. "The spirits rarely bother with me these days." The woman's eyes narrowed. "You speak as if you know them. We're old acquaintances." He made no move to invite her in. "What brings a SHR? In Maiden of the Nine Tails Temple to Orario, so far from your sacred mountain?" Surprise flickered across her composed features before she mastered it. "You recognize the order. The sword gives it away." Naruto nodded toward her katana. "Kitsune Maru, passed down through 16 generations of guardians. Though I thought the current wielder was a man named Takashi." The woman's hand moved to the sword's hilt instinctively. "My father died defending the shrine 3 months ago. I am Akemi Katsuragi, 18th guardian of the Eastern Barrier." Naruto's casual demeanor shifted subtly. He straightened, offering a small bow that contained the perfect degree of respect her position warranted. "My condolences for your loss. Takashi was a good man. You knew my father." Confusion and suspicion warred in her expression. "Our paths crossed some years ago." Naruto stepped back from the doorway. "Perhaps you should come in. The neighbors in this district are curious by profession." After a moment's hesitation, Akemi entered. Her gaze swept the apartment, taking in the organized chaos of his research materials. Naruto closed the door and gestured toward a small sitting area where cushions surrounded a low table. "Tea," he offered. "Thank you." "No." Akemi remained standing, her posture formal. "I've come on urgent business. The Eastern Barrier is weakening. The signs match ANSI. End texts describing the time before the Great Sealing." Naruto's expression gave nothing away, but he moved to a particular shelf and withdrew a scroll bound with red cord. "When did the symptoms begin?" "The sacred fire turned blue at the winter solstice. By spring equinox, the spirit guardians had grown agitated. Last week, the mirror of truth cracked from edge to center without being touched." Akemi watched him carefully. "You don't seem surprised." "Because I'm not." Naruto unrolled the scroll on the table, revealing text in a language that hadn't been widely used in thousands of years. "These events align with phenomena occurring worldwide. The incident in the dungeon today is another symptom." Akemi's eyes widened. "You know about that already." Naruto gave her a measuring look. "I was there." Understanding dawned on her face. "You're him. The one they're talking about in the guild halls. The masked adventurer who saved the Loki expedition." "News travels quickly," Naruto remarked dryly. "Then the prophecy is true." Akemi's composed exterior cracked, revealing genuine awe. "When the 9 barriers weaken, the Golden Sage will return to walk among mortals once more." Naruto's expression tightened. "Prophecies are problematic things, Katsuragi-san. Open to interpretation, easily manipulated. Yet here you stand, exactly as described." She knelt formally before him, drawing her sword and presenting it across her palms. "Golden Soul, Fox Guardian, wielder of the ancient ways. I have been sent to pledge my service to you as foretold." Naruto sighed, the sound carrying a weariness that seemed to originate from his very bones. "Rise, please. I have no interest in pledges or servitude." Akemi looked up, confused. "But the sacred texts were written by people with limited understanding of forces beyond their comprehension." Naruto knelt across from her. "I respect your dedication and your journey here, but I am not what you believe me to be." Then what are you? She challenged, making no move to rise or withdraw her offered sword. Naruto was silent for a long moment, his ancient eyes meeting her determined gaze. Finally, he said, a seeker of balance, nothing more. Someone who notices when scales tip too far in dangerous directions. The Eastern texts say you are much more than that. Akemi's voice lowered. They say you walked with the first gods. That you taught the original spirits how to take form. They say you were there when the world was young. Something flashed across Naruto's face, a momentary crack in his carefully maintained facade. For an instant, confusion and pain mingled in his expression, as if her words had triggered something buried deep within his mind. I don't. He paused, pressing fingers to his temple. Those texts exaggerate. Akemi watched this reaction with sharp attention. You don't remember, she whispered, realization dawning. The texts mentioned this possibility, that the ceiling might take your memory along with your power. Naruto's eyes snapped to hers, suddenly intense. What exactly do these texts say about the ceiling? Before she could answer, a tremor shook the building. Books 2.MB led from shelves as the floor vibrated beneath them. Through the window, they could see a column of ominous purple light erupting from the Babel Tower at the city's center. Another one, Naruto muttered, already moving toward the door. Sooner than I expected. Akemi sheathed her sword in a fluid motion and followed. What's happening? The same thing that's weakening your barrier. He grabbed a small pack from beside the door. Something is systematically dismantling the seals that keep this world in balance. They descended the stairs rapidly, emerging onto a street filled with Konfu. Said citizens staring at the purple beam piercing the darkening sky. Alarmed shouts and the clanging of warning bells spread across the city. The dungeon is responding to the disturbance at your shrine and others like it. Naruto explained as they moved against the flow of people seeking shelter. They're all connected. Parts of a single system designed to contain something that should remain imprisoned. Contained by whom? Akemi kept pace easily, her training evident in her economical movements. Naruto's expression darkened. That's what I've been trying to remember. As they neared the central plaza surrounding Babel Tower, chaos reigned. Guild officials struggled to establish order as monsters poured from the dungeon entrance, not the usual escaped creatures that occasionally reached the surface, but entities with that same oil-slick iridescence Naruto had observed on the deeper-level aberration. Adventurers from various familias had engaged the threats, their normal rivalries. Temporarily forgotten in the face of this unprecedented breach. Magic flashed against the twilight sky as elf mages launched spells from defensive positions. Warriors from the Ganesha familia had formed a perimeter, attempting to prevent monsters from reaching the civilian districts. Stay here and help the evacuation, Naruto instructed Akemi, handing her a small silver whistle. If you're overwhelmed, blow this. I'll hear it regardless of distance. She accepted the whistle but frowned. My place is fighting at your side. Your place is where you can do the most good, he countered firmly. These people need protection while I address the source. Before she could argue further, Naruto leapt onto a nearby rooftop with inhuman agility. From a hidden pocket, he withdrew the porcelain fox mask and secured it over his face. His entire demeanor shifted as the mask settled into place, his posture straightening, an aura of power emanating from him that hadn't been present moments before. From her position below, Akemi watched as his cloak materialized around him, seemingly from thin air, the simple traveling clothes replaced by the distinctive garment the color of dawn. The transformation complete, the sage bounded across rooftops toward the heart of the disturbance. Freya felt the second pulse even more strongly than the first. She stood from her golden throne, startling the assembled members of her familia who had gathered to discuss the earlier incident. It's here again, she breathed, eyes unfocused as she concentrated on the sensation. That magnificent soul. Without explanation, she swept from the room, her silver dress flowing behind her like quicksilver. Her familia members exchanged glances before Otar signaled for a select few to follow at a discreet distance. Their goddess was acting uncharacteristically impulsive, even for her. Freya moved through the city with purpose, ignoring the chaos erupting around her as citizens fled the monster incursion. Gods and goddesses were technically forbidden from using their divine powers in the mortal realm, but none would interfere with Freya as she navigated the danger. Her status in the divine hierarchy ensured that she followed the golden resonance that called to her, moving against the tide of fleeing mortals. Something about this soul pulled at memories she couldn't quite grasp, impressions fr. own before her descent to the lower world, from the misty beginnings of her divine existence. As she rounded a corner near the central plaza, she finally saw him, a figure in a dawn-colored cloak leaping between rooftops with fluid grace. A porcelain fox mask concealing his features. Even without seeing his face, she knew immediately that this was the source of the soul that had captured her attention. "There you are," she whispered, a predatory smile curving her perfect lips. The masked figure, the sage, as rumors had already named him, paused on a rooftop overlooking the Babel Tower's entrance. Monsters continued to pour from the dungeon below, their movements eerily coordinated as they engaged the defenders. Freya watched, transfixed, as the sage formed a series of hand signs unlike any magical gestures used by the mages of Orario. The air around him shimmered with golden energy that coalesced into visible form, a translucent fox-like entity composed of pure power that dwarfed the surrounding buildings. "Impossible," she breathed, silver eyes wide with astonishment. The spectral fox opened its maw and released a roar that shook the very foundations of the city. The sound carried a frequency that seemed specifically targeted. The monsters froze in place as if paralyzed, while humans and demi-humans appeared unaffected beyond covering their ears against the volume. In that moment of monster paralysis, the sage descended from the rooftop in a controlled fall that should have shattered his legs upon landing. Instead, he touched down with perfect balance in the center of the plaza. Without pausing, he slammed his palm against the ground. Sealing technique. Divine boundary. Golden light spread outward from his hand in concentric circles, forming intricate patterns of symbols that expanded to encompass the entire plaza and Babel Tower. As the light reached each paralyzed monster, the creature dissolved into particles that were drawn back toward the dungeon entrance. The purple beam emanating from the tower flickered and destabilized as it came into contact with the golden seal. For a moment, the two energies contested for dominance, creating a spectacular display of clashing power visible throughout the city. Then, with a sound like reality itself tearing, the purple beam collapsed. The golden light surged upward through the tower, momentarily illuminating every floor of the massive structure from within before fading. Silence fell across the plaza. The sage remained kneeling, one palm still pressed to the ground, his masked face turned toward the tower entrance. Slowly, he rose to his feet, seemingly unaffected by the enormous expenditure of power. Freya stood motionless at the plaza's edge, her divine senses overwhelmed by what she had witnessed. In all her millennia of existence, she had never seen a mortal channel power in this manner. It wasn't the blessing-enhanced abilities of adventurers or the structured incantations of mortal mages. This was something older, something that resonated with her own divine nature in ways she couldn't articulate. As if sensing her scrutiny, the sage turned his masked face toward her. Even across the distance separating them, Freya felt the weight of his gaze through the mosque's eyeholes, ancient, knowing, and somehow familiar. A memory stirred at the edges of her consciousness, a fragment from the time before her descent. When the gods still dwelled in the divine realm. A council chamber bathed in light brighter than any sun, beings of power beyond even her comprehension, and among them. The memory slipped away before she could grasp it fully, leaving only a lingering sense of recognition and an emotion Freya rarely experienced, uncertainty. Guild officials and adventurers cautiously approached the sage, but before they could reach him, he brought his hands together in that strange sign. The air rippled around him, and he vanished from sight, leaving behind a plaza full of confused mortals and one deeply intrigued goddess. Freya's lips curved into a smile that would have sent shivers down the spine of anyone familiar with her nature. "How fascinating," she murmured. "A mist, wrapped in power older than this city. One that seems to know me, though I cannot place him." She turned as Ottar and several other members of her familia approached. "My lady," the Boaz warrior began, "are you unharmed?" "Perfectly," she assured him, her silver eyes gleaming with newfound purpose. "Ottar, I want everything, every scrap of information, every rumor, every historical reference a figure called the sage or bearing a fox mask. Search the oldest records, consult the eldest gods who have descended." "As you wish, my lady." Ottar bowed deeply. "And when we find him?" Freya's Expression shifted to something more complex than her usual possessive desire. When you find him, do nothing but observe and report. This one. She paused, searching for words to express her intuition. This one is different. In a small clearing deep within the forest north of Orario, Naruto materialized beside an ancient oak tree. The teleportation technique, a modified version of his FA, there's Flying Thunder God Jutsu, had carried him to one of several safe locations he had prepared throughout the region. He removed the fox mask, his features tight with concentration as he processed what had just occurred. The second incursion coming so quickly after the first confirmed his suspicions. Something was systematically attacking the sealing network that stretched across the world. Troubling was what he had sensed while containing the breach, a familiar energy signature that shouldn't exist in this realm. And then there was Freya's presence at the plaza, her silver eyes filled with confusion and the first glimmers of recognition. Things are accelerating, he murmured to the silent forest. The question is whether that's coincidence or design. He sat cross-legged beneath the oak, allowing his consciousness to expand outward. The natural energy of the forest responded to his meditative state, flowing into and through him with an ease born of centuries of practice. In this state, he could perceive the faint lines of power that crisscrossed the land, the sealing network that most inhabitants of this world never noticed. Several points in the network glowed with war. Not just the eastern shrine that Akemi had come from, but similar locations across every continent. The pattern of deterioration wasn't random, it followed a specific sequence that triggered buried memories. The 9 seals must be placed simultaneously, a voice echoed from his distant past. Each anchored to a different aspect of natural law. Should they ever fail in sequence? The memory fragmented before he could grasp its conclusion, leaving him with a profound sense of urgency and incomplete understanding. This happened frequently, flashes of knowledge from a life or lives he couldn't fully recall. Abilities he instinctively knew how to use without remembering how he learned them. The sage energy flowing through him brought another memory bubbling to the surface, Silver E. Yes, watching him across a council chamber, a voice like music asking a question he couldn't quite hear, a sense of both attraction and wariness. Freya, she had been there, in that other existence he struggled to remember. But how? And in what capacity? A rustling in the undergrowth interrupted his meditation. His eyes opened, instantly alert, though he made no move to stand. You can approach, he called softly. I know you've been following me since the shrine incident. A small fox with unusual silver-tipped fur emerged from the bushes. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence far beyond that of a normal animal. You're getting sloppy in your old age, the fox said, its voice distinctly female and laced with amusement. There was a time when I couldn't track you across a closed room. Naruto's lips quirked into a small smile. Perhaps I wanted to be found. The fox sat on its haunches, regarding him with knowing eyes. The seals are failing, just as you predicted they would. The Styon is whether you're ready to remember why you created them in the first place. I'm not sure I want to remember, Naruto admitted quietly. Every fragment that returns brings more questions than answers. And a sense of responsibility I'm not certain I can bear. You bore it once, the fox reminded him. You will again, because that's who you are, in this life and all the others. Naruto studied his companion thoughtfully. You know more than you've been telling me, Kiko. The fox, Kiko, tilted her head. I know only what you allowed me to know when you created me as a fragment of your consciousness. I'm as bound by the seals as the rest of this world. And yet you've been guiding me for decades, steering me toward certain locations, certain discoveries. Following the trail of breadcrumbs you left for yourself. Kiko's tone softened. You knew that when the time came, you might resist remembering. You created safeguards, me included, to ensure you wouldn't have a choice. Naruto sighed, running a hand through his spiky blonde hair. The shrine maiden, Akemi. Her arrival isn't coincidence either, is it? The Nine Tails Temple has awaited your return for 3,000 years, Kiko confirmed. Each guardian trained from birth to recognize you and to help when the seals began to fail. And Freya, what role does she play in this? The fox's expression became unreadable. That's one memory you'll need to recover on your own. Some things are too personal to be entrusted to external safeguards. Before Naruto could press further, a distant sound caught their attention. The clear tone of the silver whistle he had given Akemi. He was on his feet instantly, mask already in hand. "We'll continue this discussion later," he told Kiko, securing the mask over his face. "We always do," the fox replied. "Yet somehow, we never get to the parts you most need to hear." With a last measuring look at his cryptic companion, Naruto formed the hand signs for teleportation and vanished from the clearing, leaving the silver-tipped fox sitting alone beneath the ancient oak. "Good luck, old friend," Kiko murmured to the empty air. "You'll need it when you finally remember who, and what, you truly are." Akemi Katsuragi had not expected to use the sage's whistle so soon after their parting. The evacuation had proceeded smoothly at first, with guild officials directing civilians toward designated shelters throughout the city. She had assisted an elderly couple, a group of frightened children separated from their parents, and several injured citizens who couldn't move quickly enough on their own. Then the secondary breach had occurred. Not at the Babel Tower this time, but in the northern residential district where many of Orario's craftsmen and merchants made their homes. Monsters unlike any recorded in the guild's bestiary erupted from the ground itself, bypassing the dungeon entirely. Akemi had immediately diverted to the new threat, her hand on key Tsune Maru's hilt as she raced through unfamiliar streets. She arrived to find a scene of chaos, buildings damaged, civilians fleeing in terror, and a small group of lower-ranked adventurers struggling against creatures that resembled wolves with scaled skin and multiple tails that ended in serpentine heads. Drawing her katana in a single fluid motion, Akemi intercepted a creature as it lunged toward a fallen adventurer. Kitsune Maru sliced through scaled hide with unexpected ease, its enchanted blade glowing faintly blue upon contact with the monster's flesh. "Fall back and protect the civilians," she commanded the exhausted adventurers. "I will handle these aberrations." They stared at her Eastern garb and unfamiliar weapon with uncertainty before the most senior among them, a young DWA-RF with a broken axe handle, nodded grimly. "As you say, my lady. But there are at least 15 more approaching from the north." Akemi acknowledged this with a curt nod, already moving into a defense stance as 3 more of the wolf-serpent hybrids stalked toward her. Her training at the Nine Tails Temple had prepared her for combat against both conventional foes and supernatural entities, but these creatures moved with an unnatural coordination that suggested intelligence beyond animal instinct. The first monster attacked from the front while the other 2 circled to flank her. Akemi responded with the flowing water technique, a series of continuous movements that allowed her to redirect momentum rather than meeting force with force. Kitsune Maru traced gleaming arcs through the air as she spun between the creatures, her blade finding vulnerable points with precision. 3 monsters fell to her blade, their bodies dissolving into that same iridescent mist she had observed at the Babel Tower. But as the dwarf had warned, more were coming, far too many for her to handle alone while also protecting civilians. Akemi reached for the silver whistle, bringing it to her lips while maintaining her defensive stance. Its clear tone rang out above the chaos, carrying a frequency that seemed to penetrate stone and distance alike. The response was almost immediate. The air several paces ahead of her shimmered, and the sage materialized in a swirl of his dawn-colored cloak. Through the eyeholes of his fox mask, his gaze quickly assessed the situation. "You handled these quite well," he observed, noting the dissolving remains of the creatures she had dispatched. "There are more coming," Akemi replied, nodding toward the northern street where shadowy forms could be seen approaching. "And they appear to be coordinating their movements." The sage tilted his head slightly, listening to something beyond human hearing. "This breach is different from the others. It's targeted, not random." "Targeted at what, not what," he corrected grimly. "Who?" Before Akemi could question him further, the approaching monsters increased their pace, charging toward them with unnatural speed. The sage stepped forward, placing himself between Akemi and the oncoming threat. "Stay behind me," he instructed, his hands already forming signs. "These aren't ordinary monsters or even aberrations like the ones at Babel. They're seeking something specific." "The Eastern Shrine houses relics that could be targets," Akemi suggested, though she didn't lower her sword. "Sacred artifacts connected to the sealing network." "They're not seeking artifacts." The sage completed his sequence of signs. Shadow clone technique. With a series of soft popping sounds and small clouds of smoke, Act duplicates of the sage appeared throughout the street, 20 identical figures in masks and dawn-colored cloaks. Each clone moved independently, engaging the approaching monsters with coordinated precision. Akemi watched in astonishment as the clones demonstrated abilities no adventurer in Orario possessed. One manipulated water from a damaged fountain to form prison-like bubbles around several creatures. Another summoned chains of golden energy that erupted from the ground to bind the largest aberrations. A third created swirling spheres of concentrated power that tore through monster flesh like paper. "How is this possible?" she whispered. "Even the highest-tier adventurers can't." "These aren't adventurer techniques," the sage interrupted, his attention focused on maintaining the clone network. "They're shinobi arts from a world that exists now only in my memory." Before Akemi could process this revelation, one of the larger monsters, a creature resembling a bear with insectoid limbs, broke through the clone defense. Instead of attacking, however, it reared up on its hind legs and spoke in a guttural voice that seemed forced through an anatomy not designed for human speech. "Sage, we have found you at last." The words emerged as a rattling hiss. "Our master awaits your return to the void." The sage went utterly still. "Your master remains sealed," he replied, his voice hard. "As you should be." The creature's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. "The 9 seals weaken. The barriers fall. What was bound shall be free again." Its compound eyes swiveled toward Akemi. "And those who serve you shall herald your return to greatness." With shocking speed, the creature lunged not at the sage but at Akemi. Despite her training and reflexes, the monster's unnatural movement caught her off guard. Clawed limbs slashed toward her throat, only to pass through empty air as the sage teleported her several feet away, his hand gripping her arm. In the same instant, one of his clones intercepted the creature, driving a spiraling sphere of energy through its center mass. The monster dissolved, but not before a final rattling hiss escaped its disintegrating form. The Void Lord rises. The cycle resumes. The forgotten god shall remember. As the last of the aberrations were dispatched by the remaining clones, an unnatural silence fell over the street. The sage's duplicates vanished in small puffs of smoke until only the original remained, standing motionless as though processing the creature's words. "What did it mean?" Akemi asked quietly. "The forgotten god shall remember." The sage reached up slowly and removed his mask, revealing Naruto's troubled face beneath. His blue eyes had darkened with emotion she couldn't quite identify, something between dread and revelation. "It means," he said quietly, "that these attacks aren't random. They're searching." He turned to meet her gaze directly. "Searching for me. And now they've found what they were looking for." Akemi studied his expression, noting the conflict evident there. The Eastern texts speak of a great sealing ritual performed by the Golden Sage to contain an entity of pure destruction, the Void Lord. They say the sage sacrificed his divinity and memory to complete the binding. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. "The texts say this explicitly." She nodded. "The sacred scroll passed down through generations of guardians contains the full account. I was to share it with you when I found you, part of my duty as the shrine's protector. I need to see this scroll." Naruto's voice held an urgency that hadn't been present before. "If it contains details about the sealing ritual, it might explain what's happening now, and how to stop it." "The scroll remains at the Eastern Shrine," Akemi replied. "I couldn't risk bringing it on my journey, not with the barriers weakening." "Then we'll have to go there." Naruto replaced his mask, once again becoming the enigmatic sage. "How quickly can you be ready to travel?" "I need only retrieve my travel pack from the inn." Akemi sheathed Kitsune Maru with a fluid motion. "But what about Orario? If these breaches continue, they'll continue regardless of whether I'm here or at the Eastern Shrine," the sage replied grimly. "The difference is that at the shrine, we might find answers that could end them permanently." As they made their way through the damaged streets toward Akemi's lodgings, neither noticed the silver-haired figure watching from the shadows of a partially collapsed building. Freya's perfect fae. Aters were animated with intense interest as she processed what she had witnessed and overheard. "The forgotten god," she murmured, the words stirring something deep within her divine consciousness. Could it be? Decision made, she turned and moved swiftly away, already formulating plans. If the sage was journeying to this Eastern Shrine, she would be there as well, one way or another. Some mysteries were too compelling to ignore, especially when they resonated with fragments of her own forgotten past. The game had changed. The hunter had become the seeker. And for the first time in millennia, Freya felt something beyond her usual predatory desire or divine ennui. She felt hope. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2, Echoes of Divinity. Dawn painted Orario's eastern districts in pale gold, first rays of sunlight glinting off elaborate spires and weathered cobblestones alike. Unlike the bustling commercial center with its perpetual commotion, the alchemical quarter awakened gradually. Its narrow streets and clustered buildings designed to contain magical accidents rather than facilitate foot traffic. The wrought iron gate of the Hermetic Society for Magical Research and Innovatio creaked open precisely as the tower bells tolled 6. A slender woman with hair the color of burnished copper emerged, arms laden with scrolls and measuring instruments, her movements quick and efficient despite the awkward burden. She wore practical attire. A high-collared jacket with numerous pockets over fitted trousers tucked into sturdy boots, all in varying shades of deep blue. Most distinctive were the enchanted spectacles perched on her nose, circular lenses that occasionally shifted color as they adjusted to analyze different types of magical energy. Absolutely fascinating, Liria Thorncrest muttered to herself, nearly colliding with a half-asleep baker making his morning deliveries. The residual signature lasted over 14 hours post-manifestation. That violates Kasparian's third principle of magical dissipation. The baker, accustomed to the eccentricities of the quarter's residents, merely sidestepped and continued on his way. Liria didn't notice, her attention fixed on the scrolls cradled in her arms as she navigated the increasingly populated streets by pure muscle memory. 2 days had passed since the unprecedented incidents at Babel Tower in the Northern District. While the Guild had officially attributed the events to dungeon irregularities currently under investigation, the magical community buzzed with theories and speculation. For Liria, especially, A-list in theoretical magical structures and anomalous energy patterns, the events represented the research opportunity of a lifetime. She had spent the previous day collecting readings from both incident sites, documenting energy residue that defied categorization within established magical taxonomies. The patterns resembled neither the divine energies of the gods nor the fauna-enhanced abilities of adventurers. Most intriguing was the golden signature at Babel Tower, a perfect counterpoint to the corrupted purple energy of the breach itself. Balance and opposition, she murmured, turning due. A side street where morning shadows still clung to ancient stone walls. Containment through equivalence rather than superior force. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. The half-elven researcher was so absorbed in her scrolls that she failed to notice the cloaked figure exiting a nondescript building directly in her path. The collision scattered her precious documents across the damp cobblestones. Watch where you're going. Liria snapped, dropping to her knees to rescue her research before the morning dew could damage the ink. Do you have any idea how long it took to calibrate these measurements? My apologies, a male voice responded, crouching to help gather the fallen scrolls. I was preoccupied. Liria glanced up, prepared to deliver a scathing assessment of the stranger's spatial awareness. When her enchanted spectacles flashed brilliant gold, she gasped, nearly dropping the scrolls she'd just retrieved. You, she whispered, her analytical mind shifting instantly from irritation to intense curiosity. It's you. The man before her, blonde-haired and blue-eyed with distinctive whisker-like marks on his cheeks, raised an eyebrow. I'm sorry, but Liria was already fumbling through her jacket pockets, extracting a small crystal pendant that pulsed with soft blue light when she held it toward him. The crystal's glow intensified to an almost painful brightness. Remarkable, she breathed, all thoughts of her scattered research forgotten. Your energy signature is identical to the residual patterns at Babel Tower. You're him, the sage. The man's expression closed instantly, his previously apologetic demeanor replaced by wary calculation. He glanced around the still quiet street before returning his attention to her. You're mistaken, he said flatly. Now, if you'll excuse me. No, I'm not. Liria stepped directly into his path, her academic enthusiasm overriding social caution. My instruments don't make mistakes. The magical resonance is unmistakable, a perfect match to the golden energy that sealed the breach. 98.7% correlation, to be precise. The stranger's eyes narrowed slightly. And you are Liria Thorncrest, senior researcher at the Hermetic Society. She thrust out her hand automatically, then awkwardly withdrew it when he made no move to accept the gesture. I've been documenting the magical aftermath of the recent incidents. Your energy pattern is unlike anything in our archives. It doesn't conform to known divine signatures, elemental affinities, or fauna manifestations. The man, Naruto, though, she didn't yet know his name, evaluated her with ancient eyes that contrasted sharply with his youthful appearance. Your research sounds fascinating, Miss Thorncrest, but I really must be going. He sidestepped her with fluid grace and continued down the street, his pace unhurried but purposeful. Liria stood momentarily stunned. Few people dismissed her expertise so casually, before hurriedly gathering her remaining scrolls and hurrying after him. Wait, she matched his stride, her shorter legs working double time. You don't understand the significance of what I've discovered. The energy you manipulated during those incidents violates fundamental principles of magical conservation. By all established theories, what you did should be impossible. Many impossible things happen every day, he replied without slowing. Perhaps your theories need revision. Liria made an indignant noise somewhere between a scoff and a growl. My theories are based on decades of rigorous research by the finest magical minds in the realm. If your abilities contradict them, that makes you an invaluable research subject. This finally caused him to stop and turn toward her, amusement briefly flickering across his features. A research subject? Is that your approach to making friends, Miss Thorncrest? She blinked, momentarily thrown by the shift in conversation. Friends? I'm not. This isn't about friendship. This is about knowledge, about understanding fundamental forces that shape our world. And what would you do with this knowledge, should you obtain it? His question carried a weight beyond simple curiosity. Liria opened her mouth to deliver her standard response about academic advancement, then paused, sensing that her usual justifications wouldn't suffice. Something in his steady gaze demanded honesty. I would document it, she said finally. Analyze its applications and limitations. Determine how it relates to existing magical frameworks. She adjusted her spectacles, a nervous habit. Knowledge is valuable in itself, especially knowledge that challenges our understanding. He studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, unexpectedly, he led, a small but genuine expression that transformed his serious features. An honest answer, at least. He inclined his head slightly. Naruto Uzumaki. Pardon, my name. Since you're so determined to study me, you might as well know what to call me. Liria felt a flush of triumph. A name was a starting point. Something she could research, connections she could trace. Naruto, she repeated, committing it to memory. Unusual phonetics for this region. Eastern origin, perhaps, or possibly. You're very focused, aren't you? Naruto interrupted, resuming his walk but at a slower pace that allowed her to keep up comfortably. I've been told it's both my greatest strength and most frustrating quality, she admitted. So, will you allow me to conduct a proper analysis of your energy signature? I have equipment at my laboratory that could. No. His tone was firm but not unkind. I appreciate your scientific curiosity, Miss Thorncrest, but I don't make a habit of becoming an experimental subject. Liria frowned. But the potential discoveries can wait, he finished for her. Some knowledge isn't ready to be quantified and catalogued. That's absurdly anti-intellectual, she protested. Knowledge doesn't need to be ready, it simply exists, waiting to be discovered and understood. Naruto glanced at her with an expression that combined amusement with something deep. A weariness that seemed at odds with his youthful appearance. There are truths in this world, Miss Thorncrest, that once known cannot be unknown. Discoveries that, once made, cannot be unmade. Old advise caution in your pursuit of them. The cryptic warning should have dampened her enthusiasm. Instead, it ignited it further. Are you suggesting your abilities have dangerous implications? Because that's all the more reason they should be properly studied and understood. A soft chuckle escaped him. You remind me of someone I knew long ago. Equally brilliant, equally stubborn. His expression turned distant, as if seeing someone else entirely. She also believed that all mysteries existed to be solved. A wise woman, clearly, Liria replied, seizing the opening. What happened to her? She discovered a truth she wasn't prepared for. The simple statement carried depths of meaning Liria couldn't fully grasp. Now, I really must be going. I have preparations to make. Preparations? For what? Her researcher's instinct for relevant details immediately focused on this new information. A journey. He stopped at an intersection where their paths would naturally diverge. It was interesting meeting you, Miss Thorncrest. Liria recognized a dismissal when she heard one, but she'd never been particularly good at accepting them. I could help, you know. Whatever you're investigating regarding these energy anomalies, I've been documenting them extensively. My research could provide valuable context. I appreciate the offer, but the rest of his response was drowned out by a tremendous crash from the direction of the main avenue. Both of them turned toward the sound as screams erupted from the more populated section of the quarter. Without exchanging words, they both moved toward the disturbance, Naruto with focused purpose, Liria with reluctant concern overlaid with scientific curiosity. They emerged onto the main thoroughfare to find chaos. A massive creature stood in the center of the avenue, its form a disjointed amalgamation of mismatched parts, the torso of a minotaur, the multiple limbs of an arachnid, and a head that continuously shifted between different monstrous visages. Most disturbing was the way it seemed to flicker in and out of physical existence, as if struggling to maintain its form in this reality. Another breach, Naruto muttered, his casual demeanor instantly replaced by alert tension. But there's no direct dungeon access in this district. It's not from the dungeon, Liria said, her enchanted spectacles analyzing the creature's magical signature. The energy pattern is completely different, it's a manifestation, not a physical entity. Something pulled through a dimensional tear. Naruto cast her a surprised glance. You can determine that. It's literally my specialty. She extracted a slender wand from an inner pocket of her jacket. Anomalous energy manifestations and cross-dimensional phenomena. The creature let out a roar that seemed to distort the air around it, the sound existing simultaneously at multiple pitches that shouldn't have been physically possible. It lashed out with spider-like limbs, shattering the front of an apothecary shop and sending glass and debris flying toward a group of civilians too frightened to move. Naruto's hands formed seals faster than Liria's eyes could track. A wall of compressed air materialized between the debris and the civilians, deflecting the dangerous projectiles harmlessly upward. Get those people out of here, he instructed Liria, already moving toward the creature with determined strides. And miss the opportunity to document a direct confrontation with an interdimensional entity. Not likely. She raised her wand, tracing complex patterns in the air that left glowing blue sigils hanging momentarily before dissolving into the fabric of reality. Constraint matrix. Level 3 binding. The sigils reappeared around the creature, expanding into a geometric cage of pure magical energy. The monster thrashed against the containment, its form becoming increasingly unstable as it fought the binding magic. That won't hold it for long, Liria warned, perspiration beading on her forehead from the effort of maintaining the spell. This entity exists partially outside our dimensional constants, it's not fully subject to our physical laws. I can see that, Naruto replied, studying the creature with narrowed eyes. But it's not here by accident. It's searching for something, as if confirming his assessment, the creature's constantly shifting head stabilized into a single form, a vaguely humanoid visage with empty sockets where eyes should have been. When it spoke, its voice resonated with the same impossible harmonics as its roar. Sage, it intoned, the word causing nearby windows to vibrate. Fragment of the whole, the Void Lord awakens, the cycle resumes. Liria shot Naruto a startled glance. It knows you, not me specifically, Naruto corrected, his expression grim. What it represents. Before she could question him further, the creature's form pulsed with dark energy. Liria's containment matrix shattered like glass, the backlash of broken magic sending her stumbling backward. The monster lunged directly for Naruto, its spider limbs propelling it forward with unnatural speed. Naruto didn't dodge. Instead, he slammed his palm against the ground, sending a wave of golden energy radiating outward. Where it touched the cobblestones, complex symbols appeared, similar to Liria's sigils but vastly more intricate. Layered with meaning her scholarly mind immediately recognized as ancient beyond reckoning. Dimensional anchor. Sacred boundary, he declared, his voice carrying the same resonant quality as the creature's, though harmonic rather than discordant. The symbols expanded upward, forming a dome that encompassed both Naruto and the charging monster. The moment the boundary completed, the creature's form stabilized, suddenly subject to the full constraints of physical reality. Naruto straightened, blue eyes now ringed with gold. "You don't belong in this realm," he told the creature, his tone almost compassionate. "You were called through by force, against the natural order." "The natural order ends," the creature replied, its multiple limbs twitching erratically. "The void reclaims all, even you, fragment." "Not today." Naruto's right hand began to glow, golden energy spiraling around his fingers to form complex patterns that reminded Liria of the most advanced magicka formulas she'd ever studied, except these moved and adapted in real time, responding to shifts in the ambient energy. The creature attacked again, but now constrained by physical laws, its movements were predictable. Naruto sidestepped with fluid grace and pressed his glowing palm against the monster's chest. The golden patterns transferred from his hand to the creature's body, spreading across its mismatched form like living calligraphy. "Return to your proper domain," Naruto commanded, his voice layered with power that made Liria's enchanted spectacles flash warning signals. "By the authority of the natural order and the covenant of realms, I banish you." The creature convulsed as the golden patterns covered it completely. For a brief moment, its form stabilized into something almost beautiful, symmetrical and harmonious, before collapsing inward like a dying star. With a sound like a sigh amplified to thunderous proportions, it vanished, leaving only a small crystal residue on the cobblestones where it had stood. The dimensional boundary faded, and Naruto knelt to collect the crystallized remains. His eyes had returned to their normal blue, the commanding presence diminished but not entirely gone. Liria approached cautiously, her analytical mind racing to process what she'd witnessed. "That wasn't a sealing technique like you used at Babel Tower," she observed. "That was a dimensional banishment. You forced it back to its origin point." Naruto pocketed the crystal and turned to her with a measuring gaze. "You have an impressive understanding of theoretical magical mechanics, Miss Thorncrest." "Liria," she corrected automatically. "And understanding the mechanics doesn't explain how you performed a banishment without a ritual circle, focused catalysts, or a divine blessing." She gestured to the street around them. "You essentially rewrote local dimensional laws with a touch." "That's impossible," he suggested with a hint of the earlier amusement. "We seem to keep returning to that word." "Who are you?" she asked directly, her scientific curiosity overwhelming social caution. "Really?" He considered her for a long moment, apparently weighing his response. Finally, he said, "Someone who recognizes that creature's nature and knows how to counter it. Which, at the moment, makes me rather busy." He glanced around at the gathering crowd of onlookers. Quote, "I should go before the guild representatives arrive with their questions." "Wait." Liria moved to block his path again, her expression determined. "You're preparing for a journey, you said. These entities are appearing with increasing frequency, and they're specifically addressing you. Whatever you're investigating, I can help. I appreciate the offer, but I've been studying anomalous dimensional phenomena for 15 years. She interrupted. "I've documented every major breach event in Orario for the past decade. My understanding of magical energy patterns is unmatched in the Hermetic Society." She adjusted her spectacles again, a nervous tell betraying the confidence in her words. "And most importantly, I just witnessed you perform magical techniques that violate fundamental principles of built my career understanding. Do you really think I'm going to just let you walk away?" Naruto's expression softened slightly. "You're very persistent. It's been noted in my performance reviews," she replied dryly. Usually not as a compliment. A reluctant smile tugged at his lips. "Where I'm going isn't safe, Liria. These manifestations are just symptoms of a larger problem, one with potentially catastrophic implications. All the more reason to have someone who understands the theoretical framework." She straightened her shoulders. "Besides, danger is a standard occupational hazard in magical research. My last experiment in quasi-stable elemental binding left me with these." She pushed back her sleeve to reveal intricate burn scars tracing patterns up her forearm. "No. WL edge worth having rarely comes without risk." Naruto studied the scars with unexpected recognition in his eyes. Fire and water elements forced into harmonic resonance. How did you? Liria stared at him in surprise. That's exactly what I was attempting. The containment matrix collapsed during the third harmonic shift. You needed a stabilizing counter-frequency, he said matter-of-factly. Earth element, specifically quartz resonance, introduced at a perpendicular angle to the primary binding. Liria's eyes widened behind her spectacles. I never considered a geometric solution to the frequency problem. Her mind immediately began racing through the implications. The crystalline structure would provide the perfect stabilizing lattice without dampening the primary resonance. For the first time, Naruto smiled fully, a warm, genuine expression that transformed his serious features. Now imagine applying that same principle to dimensional boundaries on a macro scale. That would be revolutionary, she breathed, immediately grasping the implications. You could create stable passages between dimensional planes rather than temporary tiers. The cations for exploration alone would. She stopped abruptly, narrowing her eyes at him. You're trying to distract me. Is it working? Momentarily, she admitted, but I'm still coming with you. Whatever journey you're undertaking, my expertise will be valuable. She held up a hand to forestall his objection. And before you refuse again, consider this, I've already documented your energy signature. If you leave me behind, I'll simply continue my research independently, possibly stumbling into dangers I don't fully understand. With you, at least you can ensure I don't accidentally destabilize something important. Naruto regarded her with a mixture of exasperation and reluctant respect. You fight unfairly, Liria Thorncrest. I prefer to think of it as applying appropriate leverage. She smiled, sensing victory. Besides, I can tell you're someone who prefers keeping an eye on potential problems rather than leaving them unsupervised. A resigned sigh escaped him. Pack lightly and practically. We leave tomorrow at dawn. Meet me at the eastern gate. He turned to go, then added, and bring your research on the recent anomalies. It might prove useful. I'll be there, she promised, already mentally cataloging which instruments and references she would need. And Naruto, thank you. He glanced back with a curious expression. For what? For not treating my knowledge as irrelevant. She gestured to the surrounding magical quarter. Most practitioners here see theoretical research as inferior to practical application. It's refreshing to have my expertise acknowledged. Something like understanding flickered in his ancient eyes. Knowledge and wisdom are different currencies, Liria, but both have their value. With that cryptic statement, he continued down the street, soon disappearing into the gathering crowd as guild officials began to arrive. Liria stood motionless for several moments, her mind replaying every detail of the encounter. Then, with sudden urgency, she hurried back toward her laboratory. She had preparations to make, research to organize, and most importantly, a mystery unlike any she'd encountered in her academic career, one that often talked and bent reality with casual gestures. For the first time in years, Liria Thorncrest felt the pure, uncomplicated excitement that had drawn her to magical research in the first place. Whatever came next, it would certainly not be boring. The Twilight Manor, headquarters of the Loki Familia, buzzed with unusual activity. Messengers came and went with increasing frequency. Hyle's senior members gathered in closed meetings that stretched for hours. Rumors spread among the lower-ranked adventurers, tales of unprecedented monster behavior in the dungeon, of a masked figure with godlike powers, of something ancient stirring in the world. In her private chambers, the goddess Loki reclined on a plush couch, her perpetually squinted eyes watching her executive officers with amused interest as they debated the recent events. The guild is hiding something, Finn insisted, the Palom commander's usually calm demeanor showing signs of strain. Their official explanation doesn't account for what we witnessed on the 57th floor. Agreed, Riveria added, the high elf's aristocratic features set in concerned lines. That creature wasn't a standard irregular. Its core structure didn't match any documented species, and its behavior demonstrated tactical intelligence. And then there's the sage, Ace Wallenstein interjected quietly. The Sword Princess had been uncharacteristically preoccupied since their return to the surface. His abilities weren't derived from a fauna or conventional magic. Loki stretched languidly, her trickster's smile widening. My darling Ace, are you smitten with our mysterious savior? You've mentioned him daily since your return. The blonde swordswoman shook her head, unperturbed by her goddess's teasing. It's not that. There was something familiar about him. As if I should recognize him from somewhere. This caught Loki's attention. She sat up straighter, her perpetual grin fading slightly. Familiar how? Ace frowned, struggling to articulate the sensation. His presence felt like an echo of something I've felt before. Not recently, but, she trailed off, frustrated by the elusive memory. Perhaps in your childhood, Riveria suggested gently. She had raised Ace since the girl was found alone in the dungeon, the sole survivor of a catastrophe no one fully understood. Perhaps, Ace conceded, though she didn't sound convinced. Loki's expression turned calculating. This sage character interests me more and more. First Freya starts mobilizing her entire familia to find him, and now my Ace says he feels familiar. She stood abruptly, her divine form slight but radiating subtle power. Finn, I want everything we can learn about this masked adventurer. Use whatever resources necessary. Already in progress, the Palom confirmed. But there's something else you should know. According to our sources in the Eastern District, another anomalous entity manifested this morning, not from the dungeon, but apparently through some kind of dimensional tear. And let me guess, Loki drawled, our mysterious sage happened to be there to handle it. Finn nodded. Witnesses report he banished the entity using techniques unknown to guild records. He was accompanied by a researcher from the Hermetic Society, a half-elf named Liria Thorncrest who specializes in dimensional anomalies. Liria. Riveria looked surprised. I know her by reputation. Brilliant but reclusive, not the type to involve herself in field confrontations. Apparently she's making an exception for the sage, Finn replied. My sources indicate they'll be departing Orario together tomorrow, destination unknown. Loki's grin returned, sharper than before. Well, the plot thickens. She paced the luxurious chamber, energy practically radiating from her slight form. A mysterious adventurer with godlike powers, monsters behaving with unprecedented intelligence, Freya unusually obsessed, and now a journey W. ITH Orario's foremost expert on dimensional magic. She stopped, decision made. Ace, I want you to follow them. The Sword Princess looked up in surprise. Alone, with a small team, Loki amended. Bet's tracking skills will be useful, and Lefia's magical knowledge might help understand what this Thorncrest woman is contributing. She tapped her chin thoughtfully. Keep your distance at first. Observe only. I want to know where they're going and why before we make any direct contact. And if Freya's people are following the same trail? Finn asked, always the strategist. Loki's smile turned predatory. Then things get really interesting, don't they? Nothing like a good competition to liven things up. As her executives discussed the logistics of the mission, Loki turned toward the large window overlooking Orario. Darkness had fallen, the city now illuminated by thousands of magical lights that glittered like earthbound stars. Somewhere in that sprawling metropolis, a power walked that had captured the attention of multiple deities, no small feat in a world where divine beings often succumbed to boredom after centuries of existence. What are you? She murmured to the night. And why do I feel like I should know the answer already? The Folkvanger, Freya's opulent palace in the Northwest District, glowed like a silver beacon in the moonlight. Inside the private sanctuary at its heart, the goddess of beauty stood before an ancient mirror framed in platinum and studded with gems that predated her descent to the mortal realm. This was no ordinary looking glass. The Mirror of Divine Memory was one of the few artifacts Freya had brought with her from the upper realm, a powerful tool that allowed gods to glimpse fragments of their eternal existence before descending to the mortal world. Such glimpses were typically fleeting and incomplete. The divine compact that permitted gods to walk among mortals necessarily limited access to their full powers and memories. Freya rarely used the mirror. Most gods avoided such reminiscences, finding them frustrating or even painful, tantalizing glimpses of a majesty they had voluntarily set aside. Tonight, however, she sought answers that could only be found in her forgotten past. Show me the golden soul, she commanded, her melodic voice reverberating with subtle divine power, the most she could safely exert in the lower realm. Show me where I have encountered it before. The mirror's surface rippled like liquid silver, images forming and dissolving too rapidly to comprehend. Freya pressed her palms against the cool frame, focusing her will. Slower, she instructed. Show me clearly. The chaotic flow of images stabilized, resolving into a scene from the divine realm, a vast council chamber with walls that seemed composed of pure light. Freya recognized it as the Hall of Concord, where the pantheons gathered to resolve disputes and establish divine compacts. In the vision, a younger version of herself stood among other deities. Her divine form more radiant and less constrained than her current manifestation. The assembled gods appeared agitated, their attention focused on a figure standing in the center of the chamber. The figure's features were obscured by the mirror's limitations, appearing as a silhouette wreathed in golden light. 9 ethereal tails extended from its form, swaying with hypnotic grace that somehow conveyed both power and serenity. Words were exchanged that the mirror couldn't reproduce. Divine communication transcended sound in ways the artifact couldn't fully capture. But Freya's expression in the vision told its own story. Fascination mingled with wariness, respect with calculation. The scene shifted abruptly to another encounter, this one more intimate. The golden figure and Freya alone in a garden of impossible beauty, where flowers bloomed in colors that didn't exist in the mortal spectrum. Their conversation appeared intense, Freya's younger self jest, erring emphatically while the golden figure remained still, its obscured face turned toward her with what seemed like infinite patience. Just as the scene appeared ready to reveal more, the mirror's her face cracked, a thin fracture running from edge to center. Freya jerked back in surprise as the images dissolved into swirling silver mist. No, she whispered, pressing her hands against the frame again. Show me more, show me who they were. The mirror's surface healed itself slowly, the fracture sealing as if it had never existed. But when the silver mist cleared, it showed only Freya's own reflection, beautiful, frustrated, and suddenly uncertain. A soft knock at the chamber door interrupted her concentration. Enter, she called, composing her features into their usual serene perfection. Ottar stepped into the sanctuary, bowing deeply before approaching his goddess. My lady, our agents bring news. The one called the sage will depart Orario tomorrow at dawn, traveling eastward. He will be accompanied by a half-elven researcher from the Hermetic Society. Eastward, Freya repeated thoughtfully. Toward the mountains where the old shrines stand. She turned from the mirror, decision already forming. Prepare my personal retinue. We leave an hour before dawn. Ottar's stoic expression registered brief surprise. You intend to follow personally, my lady? Yes. Her silver eyes gleamed with determination. This is too important to entrust to proxies, no matter how capable. The Boaz warrior bowed again. As you wish, though perhaps a more subtle approach might be advisable. The sage has proven adept at avoiding attention. A smile curved Freya's perfect lips. Oh, I don't intend to hide my interest, Ottar. Quite the contrary. She moved to a carved chest and withdrew a small silver box. Opening it revealed a medallion of unusual design, platinum inlaid with opalescent stone that shifted colors like the northern lights. I intend to make him an offer he cannot reasonably refuse. And if he does refuse? Ottar asked carefully. Freya's smile turned enigmatic. Then I shall have to be persuasive. It's been some time since I've had to truly work for something I desire. She closed the silver box with a decisive click. I find I'm rather looking forward to the challenge. Night settled over the eastern quarter of Orario, where architecture reflected the cultural heritage of immigrants from distant lands across the sea. Here, pagoda-style roofs mingled with the western construction predominant throughout the city, creating a distinctive skyline. Silhouetted against the star-filled sky. In a modest inn catering to travelers from the eastern lands, Akemi Katsuragi knelt before a small portable shrine she had established in her room. Incense spiraled toward the ceiling as she completed her evening prayers, hands forming the traditional seals taught to shrine guardians since time immemorial. The final seal, fingers interlaced with thumbs ouching to form a circle, triggered an unexpected reaction. The incense smoke coalesced into distinct shapes, 9 foxes running in a circle around a central pillar of light. Akemi's eyes widened. Such a manifestation typically occurred only within the sacred boundaries of the shrine itself. Venerable spirits, she whispered, maintaining the hand seal despite her surprise. I acknowledge your presence and humbly request guidance. The smoke foxes continued their circular dance for several moments before stopping simultaneously, all 9 turning to face her directly. Then, as one, they dissolved. Vedin reformed into a single image. A man with spiky hair and distinctive facial markings, surrounded by 9 tails of light. Akemi's breath caught. The image was unmistakably Naruto, yet transformed, more radiant, more powerful. His human form merely a vessel for something far greater. The smoke portrait held for a heartbeat before dissolving into ordinary incense trails once more. She lowered her hands slowly, mind racing to interpret the vision. The shrine spirits rarely communicated so directly, and never outside the sacred mountain's boundaries. Their message seemed clear. Naruto was indeed the sage of prophecy. The divine entity whose return had been foretold in the ancient texts. Yet something troubled her about the vision, a detail that nagged at her trained observer's mind. In the traditional iconography preserved at the shrine, the sage was depicted with 9 tails arrayed behind him like a peacock's display. In the smoke vision, however, the tails had encircled him protectively, as if shielding him from something beyond the image's boundaries. A warning, she murmured, rising fluidly to her feet. Not just confirmation, but caution. Moving to her travel pack, she extracted a small wooden case inlaid with mother of pearl. Inside, nestled on silk padding, lay 9 slender metal needles, each inscribed with microscopic characters too small for ordinary vision to decipher. These were the sealing needles of binding, sacred tools passed down through generations of shrine guardians, to be used only in the direst circumstances. Akemi had brought them against her father's explicit instructions. They remain in the shrine, he had insisted during her training. Only if the sage himself requests them may they leave the sacred mountain. She had disobeyed, driven by an instinct she couldn't articulate, a sense that events were accelerating beyond the ancient prophecy's timeline. Now, with the spirits' vision still fresh in her mind, she felt vindicated in her decision. The barriers weakened faster than anticipated, she whispered to the silent room. The cycle turns more quickly than the ancients foresaw. A soft tapping at her window interrupted her contemplation. Instinctively, her hand moved to Kitsune Maru's hilt as she approached cautiously. The inn room was 3 stories above the street. No ordinary visitor could reach her window. Parting the simple bamboo curtains revealed a small silver fox perched impossibly on the narrow windowsill, its intelligent eyes regarding her expectantly. Akemi recognized it immediately as the same unusual creature she had glimpsed briefly during her initial encounter with Naruto. After a moment's hesitation, she unlatched the window. The fox slipped inside with fluid grace, its movements too precise for an ordinary animal. It sat on its haunches in the center of the room, tail curled neatly around its paws. "Greetings, guardian," the fox said, its feminine voice startling despite Akemi's expectation of something unusual. "I am Kiko, emissary of the sage." Akemi knelt to bring herself closer to the creature's level, offering the traditional bow of respect used when addressing shrine spirits. "I am honored by your presence, Kiko-san. How may I serve the sage?" The fox tilted her head slightly, studying Akemi with knowing eyes. "You've had a vision," she stated rather than asked. "The shrine spirits reach out even here, so far from their sacred ground." "Interesting. They showed me the sage's true form," Akemi confirmed. "And I believe they offered a warning as well." "Perceptive." Kiko's tail swished once, the only indication of agitation in her otherwise composed demeanor. "The warning is well-founded. Events unfold more rapidly than anticipated. The journey to your shrine must be accelerated. We plan to depart tomorrow at dawn." "Too late." Kiko rose to her paws. "You must leave tonight, under cover of darkness. The barriers between worlds thin with each passing hour. Already, entities seek to prevent the sage from reaching the eastern shrine." Akemi frowned. "Entities like the aberration in the northern district. Similar in origin, different in purpose." The fox moved to the window, gazing out at the night sky. "Those were scouts, seeking confirmation of the sage's presence. What comes next will be hunters, sent specifically to intercept him before he can recover what awaits at your shrine." "The sacred scroll," Akemi whispered, understanding dawning. "It contains knowledge he needs." "Knowledge he once possessed," Kiko corrected. "Knowledge he intentionally sealed away, even from himself. For the protection of all realms." Akemi rose decisively. I'll prepare immediately. One more thing, Guardian. Hiko turned back from the window, her silver-tipped fur catching the moonlight. You are not the only one who seeks to accompany the sage on this journey. A researcher with knowledge of dimensional boundaries has already secured his agreement to join. The half-elf from the Hermetic Society, Akemi nodded. I've heard of her work. Her expertise could prove valuable. Perhaps, Hiko allowed, her tone neutral. But know this, where the sage walks, gods and powers follow. Some seek to help, others to hinder. Trust must be earned, not assumed. She leapt gracefully back to the windowsill. Meet at the eastern gate in 1 hour. Come prepared for immediate departure. With that, the fox vanished. Not by jumping or running, but by simply ceasing to be, as if she had stepped sideways out of reality. Akemi stood motionless for several heartbeats, processing the encounter. Then, with practiced efficiency, she began gathering her belongings. The wooden case with the sealing needles she secured inside her robes, closest to her body. Kitsune Maru she kept at her hip, never more than a hand's reach away. As she worked, her mind returned to the spirits, vision, the 9 tails protectively encircling the sage. A warning, yes, but P.S. also a reminder. Her duty as guardian extended beyond simply leading him to the shrine. She was to protect him until he remembered how to protect himself. The forgotten god shall remember, she murmured, echoing the aberration's cryptic statement. But at what cost? In his modest apartment above the bookshop, Naruto stood at the window, gazing at the night sky. Stars wheeled overhead patterns he had watched for countless lifetimes, their familiar dance offering a constancy few other things in his long existence could match. Behind him, the small silver fox materialized from the shadows. It's done, Hiko reported. The guardian will meet us within the hour. She brings the sealing needles. Naruto nodded without turning. And the researcher, Liria, still planning for a dawn departure, Hiko replied. Though given her curiosity, she may arrive early. Send her a message. Plans have changed. He finally turned from the window, his expression somber. The void stirs more actively than we anticipated. I can feel the barriers thinning, not just at the eastern shrine, but worldwide. Hiko's ears flattened slightly. You're remembering more. Fragments only. Naruto pressed fingers to his temple, as if physically trying to organize his thoughts. Enough to know that what awaits us is far more dangerous than these preliminary incursions suggest. And the gods? Hiko asked carefully. Freya has taken personal interest. Others will follow. A complex emotion flickered across Naruto's features at the mention of Freya's name. Some connections transcend mortal memory, he said after a moment. Some bonds persist even when their context is forgotten. You remember her? Hiko's tone conveyed surprise. Not specifically, Naruto admitted. But I recognize the resonance between us. In the divine realm, we were connected, somehow. He shook his head in frustration. The details remain elusive. Perhaps that's intentional, the fox suggested. Some memories may be too dangerous to recover prematurely. Naruto's expression hardened. Dangerous or not, I need to remember. These incursions will continue, escalating in frequency and power. Without you, understanding what I once knew, what I deliberately forgot, I cannot hope to contain the void permanently. He moved to the wooden chest banded with metal sigils and extracted several small scrolls and a pouch of unusual design. Each item he tucked into hidden pockets within his clothing. Last, he withdrew the fox mask, studying its porcelain surface thoughtfully. The mask helps, he murmured, almost to himself. When I wear it, the memories seem closer to the surface. As if the persona of the sage exists partly separate from Naruto Uzumaki. Because it does, Hiko confirmed. The sealing at fragmented your consciousness was designed that way intentionally. The mask serves as a bridge between aspects of yourself, the mortal identity you've cultivated over centuries and the divine entity you once were. Naruto traced the red markings on the mask's surface with a gentle finger. And which is the true self, I wonder? The god who chose to forget, or the man who struggles to remember? Perhaps neither, Hiko suggested softly. Perhaps both. Identity isn't fixed, even for immortals. Especially for immortals. A faint smile touched Naruto's lips. Philosophical this evening, aren't you? I reflect my creator's nature. The fox replied with dignified amusement. both the wisdom and the occasional insufferable smugness. This earned a genuine chuckle from Naruto. Fair enough. He secured the mask inside his cloak and shouldered the small pack he had prepared. Time to go. The eastern gate in an hour. Hiko leapt to the windowsill, her form already beginning to fade. I'll deliver your message to the researcher and scout ahead for potential dangers. The paths east are less traveled and more easily ambushed. Be careful, Naruto cautioned. These entities can sense your connection to me. They'll target you if discovered. The fox's expression might have been a smile, had her facial structure permitted it. I'm a fragment of the nine-tailed fox, created by the sage himself. I think I can handle a few interdimensional aberrations. With that, she vanished completely. Alone once more, Naruto took a final look around the apartment, one of many temporary homes he had established over centuries of wandering. Books and scrolls lined the shelves, each containing fragments of knowledge he had collected in his quest to understand his own fractured existence. Maps, marked with locations of power points across the world, covered one wall, many annotated with observations from multiple visits across different eras. It was the dwelling of a scholar, a seeker, not a god. Yet increasingly, he felt the stirring of something beyond mortal comprehension within himself. Each manifestation he countered, each seal he reinforced, seemed to awaken dormant aspects of his consciousness. The forgotten god shall remember, he murmured, echoing the aberration's words. But will the man survive the remembering? With no answer forthcoming from the silent apartment, Naruto extinguished the lights and slipped out into the darkness. The journey ahead promised both revelation and danger, though which posed the greater threat to his carefully constructed existence remained to be seen. In the shadows near Orario's eastern gate, a figure watched the preparations with keen interest. Dressed in nondescript clothing that would attract no attention, hood pulled low to conceal distinctive features. The observer had monitored the sage's movements since the incident at Babel Tower. Ottar had assigned this surveillance task personally, a measure of its importance to Freya. The observer had expected a routine assignment: document the target's movements, associates, and abilities. Standard information gathering to satisfy a goddess's passing interest. What they hadn't expected was to be following a legend seemingly stepped out of ancient myth. The sage's confrontation with the aberration in the alchemical quarter had confirmed suspicions that this was no ordinary adventurer blessed by a deity's fauna. His abilities defied categorization within known magical systems. More telling was the reverence with which the Eastern Shrine maiden addressed him, not as a powerful mortal, but as something far greater. Now, as the appointed hour approached, the observer noted increased activity near the gate. Guild patrols had been doubled, though whether due to general security concerns after the recent incidents or specific intelligence about tonight's departure remained unclear. More interesting was the half-elven woman hurrying toward the meeting point, arriving well before the scheduled dawn departure. Liria Thorncrest carried a pack that seemed too heavy for her slender frame, yet she moved with determined energy, her enchanted spectacles occasionally flashing as they analyzed ambient magical energies. From another direction came the shrine maiden, Akemi, moving with the controlled grace of a trained warrior. Unlike the researcher's obvious burden, the Eastern woman traveled with minimal visible equipment, just a small pack and her ever-present sword. The observer shifted position to maintain visual contact without risking detection. Freya had been explicit in her instructions: document everything, interfere with nothing. The goddess intended to make her own approach when the time was right. The eastern sky remained dark, dawn still hours away, when a third figure appeared at the rendezvous point. The sage, still in his civilian identity as Naruto Uzumaki, materialized with that same impossible technique that defied conventional teleportation magic. One moment the space was empty, the next, he stood there as if he had always been present. The observer strained to hear the conversation between the three figures, catching only fragments. Timeline accelerated. ... Barriers weakening faster than anticipated. Need to reach the shrine before the third alignment. More concerning was what happened next. The sage turned his head slightly, looking directly toward the observer's hiding place with unsettling precision. For a moment, those ancient blue eyes seemed to pierce the darkness, the disguise, and the very concept of concealment itself. The observer held perfectly still, employing every technique of stealth their training provided. After what seemed an eternity, the sage turned away, returning his attention to his companions. A decision point had arrived. Continue the surveillance as instructed, or retreat to report this development. The observer hesitated only briefly before choosing the former. Freya's interest in this mysterious figure went beyond her usual capricious fascination. Something deeper drove her, something the observer had never witnessed in years of loyal service. As the small group departed through the eastern gate, moving with purpose into the pre-dawn darkness, the observer followed at a careful distance. Whatever lay ahead on this journey, Freya would want to know every detail. The game of gods and powers had begun in earnest, and somewhere beyond Orario, in the ancient mountains where forgotten shrines stood sentinel against forces beyond mortal comprehension, answers awaited, for the sage, for his companions, and for a goddess who sought to recover memories from before time itself. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, Shadows of the Past. 3 days east of Orario, the damp forests gave way to rocky highlands. Wind-carved plateaus rose like ancient monuments from the increasingly arid landscape, their layered sediment recording geological histories spanning eons. Nipper and scrub oak clung to sheltered ravines, survivors in a land where water had become precious and rare. At the vanguard of their small expedition, Naruto navigated the rugged terrain with the ease of someone who had traversed it countless times before. Behind him, Akemi maintained a steady pace, her formal shrine maiden's attire exchanged for more practical traveling clothes that still RPO rated the traditional red and white colors of her order. Liria brought up the rear, occasionally pausing to collect samples of unusual minerals or plants that caught her researcher's eye. We should reach the Amber Pass by nightfall, Naruto announced as they paused atop a ridge overlooking the sprawling wilderness before them. There's a sheltered valley with a reliable spring where we can make camp. Liria pushed her enchanted spectacles higher on her nose, their lenses briefly flashing as they analyzed the distant topography. That's at least another 15 kilometers through difficult terrain. Are you certain we shouldn't make camp earlier? The highlands aren't safe after dark, Akemi replied before Naruto could. When both companions looked at her questioningly, she elaborated. Desert wraiths emerge from the sandstone at twilight. My people call them hollow winds, for the sound they make, like someone's final breath stretched into eternity. Fascinating. Liria immediately extracted a small notebook from one of her many pockets. Are they corporeal manifestations or pure energy constructs? Do they maintain consistent form or fluctuate based on ambient conditions? Akemi blinked, momentarily thrown by the barrage of technical questions. They kill travelers who linger too long in exposed areas, she said finally, her tone suggesting this was the only relevant information. What she means, Naruto interjected with a hint of amusement, is that academic classification becomes somewhat irrelevant when facing immediate existential threats. On the contrary, Liria countered, undeterred. Proper classification is essential for developing effective countermeasures. For instance, if these wraiths are primarily composed of spectral energy with minimal physical anchoring, conventional barriers would prove ineffective, whereas harmonic dissonance fields might. They hate fire and can't cross running water, Naruto interrupted gently. Hence our destination, a sheltered valley with a spring-fed stream. Liria looked momentarily disappointed at this pragmatic simplification but dutifully noted the information in her book. Traditional weaknesses, then. That suggests conventional spectral classification rather than true interdimensional entities. She glanced up at the sun's position. In that case, we should indeed press on. As they resumed their journey, Akemi moved closer to Naruto, her voice lowered for privacy. She speaks of these matters as academic curiosities, not genuine threats. Different backgrounds breed different perspectives, he replied. Neither criticism nor defense in his tone. Her analytical approach has value, even if her priorities sometimes differ from ours. From yours, you mean, Akemi corrected. My priority remains clear, getting you safely to the Eastern Shrine. Naruto glanced at her with that ancient gaze that seemed at odds with his youthful appearance. And why is that your priority, Akemi? Beyond duty to your shrine, beyond the prophecies you were raised on, why do you personally believe this journey matters? The question caught her off guard. She walked several paces in silence before answering. Because I've seen what happens when the barriers weaken. 3 months ago, something emerged from the void spaces between our realm and others. It consumed my father. Not just his body, something deeper, what some might call his soul. Her normally composed expression faltered. I watched a lifetime of training, discipline, and power amount to nothing against it. If such entities continue breaking through, you seek vengeance, Naruto observed quietly. I seek balance, she corrected, echoing his own words from their first meeting. The natural order must be preserved, or very thing, not just individual lives, will be lost. Naruto's expression softened. Your father would be proud of your perspective. Many in your position would be driven solely by personal grievance. My personal feelings are irrelevant to my duty, Akemi stated, though the slight tightening of her hand on Kitsune Maru's hilt betrayed deeper emotions than her words acknowledged. From behind them, Liria called out, interrupting their conversation. The ambient energy patterns are shifting. Do you feel that? Both turned to find the half-elven researcher standing still, her enchanted spectacle glowing with unusual intensity as she stared at something invisible to ordinary perception. What do you see? Naruto asked, immediately alert. Dimensional thinning, Liria replied, her academic demeanor giving way to genuine concern. Similar to the pattern that preceded the manifestation in the alchemical quarter, but more deliberate. As if something is systematically testing the boundary rather than simply pressing against it. Naruto closed his eyes briefly, extending his senses in a manner neither woman fully understood. When he opened them again, his expression had hardened. We're being tracked. Akemi's hand moved to her sword. Monsters. Or guild agents. Neither. Naruto surveyed their surroundings with new intensity. Something that exists partially between realms. It's been following us since yesterday. Staying just beyond the periphery of normal detection. Why would it track us rather than attack directly? Liria asked, already formulating theories. Conservation of energy during cross-dimensional maintenance. Strategic assessment. Or perhaps, it's waiting for something, Naruto interrupted. Or someone. He made a quick decision. Change of plans. Don't wait for nightfall. We make for the Amber Pass now, as quickly as possible. The pass is exposed, Akemi protested. If we're being tracked, better to face what comes in a location of our choosing than be caught in the open when night falls, Naruto countered. The pass has natural choke points we can use to our advantage. Without further discussion, he increased their pace, leading them down from the ridge toward a narrow canyon that wound between towering sandstone cliffs. Akemi followed immediately, while Liria hurriedly packed away her notes before jogging to catch up. None of them noticed the shadow that briefly detached itself from the base of a distant plateau, moving with unnatural speed across the sun-baked ground before melding with another patch of darkness. If they had, they might have glimpsed the outline of a human figure within that shadow, watching, calculating, and waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Amber Pass earned its name from the PECU. Liar quality of light that filtered through its narrow walls during certain hours of the day. Mineral deposits in the sandstone refracted sunlight into honeyed hues that bathed the winding passage in golden warmth. Under different circumstances, the effect might have been beautiful. Today, it felt like traveling through the throat of some great beast, swallowed by earth and stone with no guarantee of emergence. The energy distortion is intensifying, Liria reported, her enchanted spectacles continuously adapting to analyze the fluctuating patterns. Whatever is tracking us, it's getting closer, or stronger. Possibly both. How much farther to the defensible position you mentioned? Akemi asked Naruto, her training as a shrine guardian evident in how she continuously scanned their surroundings. Kitsune Maru half drawn from its sheath. Just ahead, there's a natural amphitheater where the canyon widens before narrowing again. Naruto's movements had subtly changed as they'd entered the pass, becoming more fluid. More aware. The casual traveler had given way to something more primal, more dangerous. The high ground will give us advantage if. He stopped mid-sentence, head tilting slightly as if listening to a sound beyond normal hearing. Without warning, he shoved both women roughly aside, just as a barrage of slender darts embedded themselves in the canyon wall where they had been standing. Down, he commanded, already moving to intercept their attacker. A figure materialized from what appeared to be solid rock, stepping out of the sandstone's shadow as if emerging from a doorway. Slim and agile, clad in layered fabrics of midnight blue and charcoal gray, the newcomer moved with uncanny grace. A desert-style headdress wrapped around their head and lower face, leaving only intense amber eyes visible, eyes that fixed on Naruto with lethal focus. Sage, the figure hissed, the voice identifying her as female despite her concealing attire. Your journey ends here. She attacked with breathtaking speed, drawing twin curved daggers that gleamed with an oily black substance along their edges. Naruto evaded the first strike with a backward step, countered the second with a deflecting palm, and narrowly avoided the third with a sideways roll that positioned him between the assassin and his companions. Who sent you? He demanded, making no move to counter it. Tack despite multiple openings in her aggressive assault. The future, she replied cryptically, her daggers tracing deadly arcs through the air as she pressed her attack. The salvation of my people. The prophecy that names you World Destroyer. Naruto's eyes widened briefly at this last statement. That momentary surprise cost him. One of her blades slipped past his defense, scoring a shallow cut along his forearm. Immediately, the wound's edges turned an alarming shade of purple. Poison, he muttered, shaking his arm as if to dispel the spreading discoloration. Fast-acting neurotoxin, desert scorpion derivative. Specifically designed for you, the assassin confirmed, amber eyes gleaming with grim satisfaction. Formulated to target nervous systems with accelerated healing properties. Your reputation precedes you, Sage. Quote, as does yours, Shadowwalker. Naruto countered her next attack with greater caution, keeping the poisoned blades at bay. Your tribe rarely ventures this far from the glass desert. What prophecy brings you hunting me with such determination? The assassin faltered momentarily, surprised by his knowledge of her origins. That hesitation was all Naruto needed. His hands formed a series of rapid signs, ending with his palm striking the ground. Earth style. Binding quicksand. The stone beneath the assassin's feet instantly transformed to fluid sand that engulfed her legs to mid-thigh. Hardening again just as quickly. Immobilized but far from defeated, she snarled and made her own hand signs, unfamiliar to Liria and Akemi, but clearly recognizable to Naruto, who cursed under his breath. Shadow transportation technique, he muttered. Akemi, Liria, prepare yourselves. The trapped assassin melted into her own shadow, disappearing completely onl. Why to re-emerge from Liria's shadow directly behind the startled researcher. One poisoned dagger pressed against the half-elf's throat while the other pointed toward Naruto. Stay back, the assassin warned, or your companion dies painfully. Liria remained remarkably composed for someone with a poisoned blade at her jugular. Fascinating application of dimensional folding, she observed, adjusting her spectacles with her free hand despite the precarious situation. You're not teleporting but traversing the shadow dimension as a shortcut through conventional space. The assassin blinked, momentarily thrown by this academic assessment of her deadliest technique. Be silent. The poison on your blade, Liria continued undeterred, appears to be a modified extraction from the red dune scorpion. Likely stabilized with nightshade derivatives and enhanced with crystallized magic stone from a particularly toxic species of dungeon monster. Am I correct? Yes, the assassin admitted before catching herself. It doesn't matter. Your companion will stand down or you'll die. Nisha Shadow Trace, Naruto said calmly, making no aggressive moves but showing no fear either. Last dog, HTER of the Obsidian Tribe's ruling line. Your people haven't sent an assassin beyond the glass desert in over 3 centuries. Whatever prophecy drives you, I assure you it has been misinterpreted. The assassin, Nisha, tightened her grip on Liria. You know nothing of my tribe's visions. The elders saw your coming, the golden-souled one whose awakening fractures the pillars of creation. Where you walk, the void follows. That last part might be technically accurate, Naruto acknowledged, though your causality is reversed. I don't bring the void, I respond to its encroachment. Lies, Nisha hissed. The sacred pools showed your path across the realms, the chaos that follows in your wake. Millions dead, worlds consumed. Potential futures, not certainties, Naruto countered. Your tribe's sacred pools show possibilities, not fixed destinies. That's why you're here with poisoned blades instead of accepting the prophecy as inevitable, isn't it? You believe you can change what was foreseen. This gave her pause, uncertainty flickering in those amber eyes. Liria chose this moment to contribute helpfully. If I might add, these prophecies often suffer from contextual displacement during interdimensional observation. The chaos attributed to him could easily be the consequence of his absence rather than his presence. Silence. Nisha pressed the blade closer to Liria's throat, drawing a thin line of blood. Your clever words won't. She never finished the sentence. Akemi, who had been slowly circling during the exchange, struck with devastating precision. Kitsune Maru's sheath, not the blade itself, connected with Nisha's wrist, sending the dagger at Liria's throat clattering away while simultaneously sweeping the assassin's legs from under her. As Nisha fell, she instinctively melted into shadow again, but this time, Naruto was prepared. His hands completed a complex sealing technique just as she began to disappear. Shadow binding. Illumination prison. Golden light erupted from his palms, spreading across the canyon floor in intricate patterns that eliminated all shadows within the area. Nisha materialized mid-transport, her technique disrupted by the sudden absence of darkness to travel through. She landed hard on the stone, momentarily stunned. Before she could recover, Akemi pressed Kitsune Maru's edge against her throat, a perfect reversal of the previous hostage situation. Yield, the shrine maiden commanded, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. Nisha glared up at her captors, defiance clear despite her disadvantaged position. Kill me if you must. Another will take my place. The prophecy demands your end, sage. I have no intention of killing you, Naruto replied, approaching cautiously. The purple discoloration had spread halfway up his forearm, but he seemed more inconvenienced than debilitated by the poison. I intend to show you why your prophecy, while accurate in its observations, is flawed in its conclusions. He knelt beside her, just beyond striking range, and extended his poisoned arm. Your toxin is impressive, specifically designed to overwhelm enhanced healing abilities by targeting the accelerated cellular regeneration itself. Against most opponents, it would be devastatingly effective. As he spoke, golden energy began to emanate from his body, not externally projected as with his techniques, but radiating from within. Visible beneath his skin like sunlight through rice paper. Where this energy touched the purple discoloration, the poison receded, purified not by counteracting the toxin but by fundamentally reharmonizing it with his own essence. But I am not most opponents, he continued softly. And what your prophecy showed as destruction, I suspect was transformation. Nisha stared at the demonstration, amber eyes wide with reluctant fascination. How? That poison has killed entities that could regenerate severed limbs in minutes. Because I'm not healing in the conventional sense, Naruto explained. I'm restoring balance at the fundamental level. Your tribe understands this concept better than most. It's the foundation of your shadow walking. The balance between light and darkness, substance and void. Something flickered in Nisha's expression. Recognition, perhaps, or the first seed of doubt. The pools showed devastation, she insisted, though with less conviction. Quote, entire civilizations consumed by golden fire. May I? Naruto gestured toward her forehead. After a moment's hesitation and a glance at Akemi's unwavering blade, Nisha gave a curt nod. Naruto pressed 2 fingers gently against her brow. Both their eyes closed simultaneously as if entering a shared meditation. For several tense moments, they remained motionless while Akemi maintained her vigilance. T-Guard and Liria observed with undisguised fascination, her spectacles recording everything. When they opened their eyes, Nisha's held a new uncertainty. You showed me what the pools couldn't. Context. Naruto finished for her. The devastation you witnessed wasn't caused by my awakening, but by what happens if I fail to fully awaken. The golden fire isn't destruction but purification. The only force capable of containing the void that threatens to consume everything. He stood, offering her a hand up. Your tribe sent you to kill me based on an incomplete vision. The true prophecy isn't that I must be stopped, but that I must succeed. Akemi looked alarmed. You're trusting an assassin who just tried to kill you. I'm trusting someone whose motivations align with our own, once properly understood. Naruto corrected. He kept his hand extended to Nisha. The choice is yours, Shadow Walker. Complete your mission based on partial information, or join us to discover the full truth. Nisha remained motionless for several heartbeats, conflict evident in her expressive eyes. Finally, she reached up and unwound the fabric concealing the lower half of her face, revealing harp features with the deep bronze complexion characteristic of the desert tribes. A network of ritual scarification marked her cheeks and chin, symbols Liria recognized as ancient runes for seer and hunter. If you lie, she said directly to Naruto, if what you showed me is manipulation rather than truth, I will find a way to end you that no regeneration can overcome. Fair enough, he acknowledged with the faintest smile. She grasped his offered hand and allowed him to help her up. Akemi reluctantly sheathed Kitsune Maru but kept her hand resting on its hilt, her distrust evident. The poison, Liria interjected, approaching to examine Naruto's now healed arm with professional curiosity. How did you neutralize it at the molecular level without a counteragent? The energetic trans formation I observed violates conservation principles unless you're not transforming the poison at all, but rather realigning it with some sort of fundamental pattern recognition matrix. Something like that, Naruto agreed. Though his attention remained focused on Nisha. We should reach the defensible position before discussing further details. Whatever has been tracking us is still out there. And now it knows exactly where we are. As if on cue, a low, rumbling growl echoed through the canyon, a sound too deep and resonant to have originated from any natural predator. The amber light filtering through the canyon walls dimmed suddenly, as though something vast had momentarily blocked the sun. What is that? Akemi asked, drawing her sword once more. Void Hound, Nisha answered grimly, retrieving her daggers from where they had fallen. They hunt by tracking dimensional disturbances. Your binding technique likely drew its attention. Or it was already tracking us in. Waiting for the optimal moment to attack, Naruto countered. Either way, we need to move. Now, the growl came again, closer this time, accompanied by the sound of massive claws scrabbling against stone. Liria's enchanted spectacles flashed rapid warnings as they detected energy patterns destabilizing throughout the canyon. The dimensional boundary is collapsing locally, she reported, prophase. Seonal excitement warring with healthy fear in her voice. Whatever's coming is tearing its way through rather than slipping between weakened points. Can you slow it down? Naruto asked Nisha directly. Your shadow techniques, can they create a temporary barrier? The desert assassin hesitated only briefly before nodding. For a few minutes at most. It will cost me, though. Do it, he instructed. We'll help you afterward. Without further discussion, Nisha dropped to one knee and slammed both palms against the canyon floor. Shadow domain. Absolute darkness. The effect was immediate and disorienting. All light within a 30-meter section of the canyon simply ceased to exist, not blocked, not absorbed, but negated entirely. Even Liria's enchanted spectacles couldn't penetrate the perfect blackness. This way, Nisha's voice guided them through the darkness she alone could navigate. The shadow domain temporarily disconnects this section of space from the adjacent dimensional planes. The Void Hound can't break through what it can't locate. They moved blind through the darkness, guided by Nisha's directions and the occasional touch of her hand on an arm or shoulder. The experience was profoundly disorienting. Sound behaved strangely within the shadow domain, echoing at unexpected intervals or seemingly swallowed entirely. After what felt like an eternity but was likely only minutes, light gradually returned as they emerged from the affected area. The canyon widened into the natural amphitheater Naruto had mentioned, a roughly circular space where the walls curved outward before narrowing again on the far side. Multiple ledges at varying heights offered defensive positions, while a small spring bubbled from a crack in the western wall, forming a shallow pool before continuing as a narrow stream through the canyon's exit. We've bought some time, but not much, Nisha warned, her voice strained from the effort of maintaining the shadow domain during their escape. Dark circles had formed beneath her amber eyes, and a thin trickle of blood ran from her nose. The Void Hound will find another approach once it realizes it can't follow directly. Rest while you can, Naruto told her, guiding her to a flat boulder near the spring. That technique took more from you than you're admitting. She didn't deny it, sinking onto the stone with poorly concealed exhaustion. My tribe's techniques were designed for short tactical advantages, not sustained barriers. While Nisha recovered, Naruto quickly organized their defense. Liria, set up your analytical equipment. I need to know the moment that thing breaks through. Akemi, the high ground is yours. Your sword techniques will be most effective from an elevated position. Both women moved to comply without question, recognizing the natural authority in his voice. As they prepared, Naruto approached the spring, kneeling beside its burbling source. He placed his palm against the wet stone, closing his eyes in concentration. "What are you doing?" Nisha asked, watching him with wary curiosity. "Enhancing what's already here," he replied without opening his eyes. Natural springs in these highlands are connected to ancient aquifers, underground rivers that have flowed since before human civilization. They carry memories of sorts. Golden energy seeped from his palm into the stone, following the path of water upstream through solid rock. The spring's flow increased noticeably, the clear water taking on a subtle luminescence as it pooled and flowed through the amphitheater. "There," he said, finally opening his eyes. "The water barrier is strengthened. If your assessment of void hounds is accurate, they'll be reluctant to cross running water imbued with natural energy." From her position on a high ledge, Akemi called down, "Something approaches from the eastern rim. It doesn't move like any natural creature." Liria's instruments began emitting a high-pitched warning tone. "Dimensional breach imminent." The pattern suggests a directed intrusion rather than random manifestation. Naruto moved to the center of the amphitheater, hands already forming the seals for a defensive technique. "Everyone, maintain your positions. Whatever comes through, do not engage directly unless I fall." Encouraging tactical assessment, Nisha muttered, forcing herself to her feet despite her exhaustion. She drew her daggers again, the poisoned edges gleaming in the late afternoon light. The air above the eastern rim of the canyon distorted like heat waves above sun-baked sand, then tore open with a sound like fabric ripping on a cosmic scale. Through this vertical wound in reality emerged a creature that defied conventional biological classification. It resembled a massive hound in the same way a nightmare resembles actual memory, a crude approximation twisted by fundamental wrongness. 6 legs ending in obsidian claws supported a body covered not with fur but with what appeared to be constantly shifting shadows. Its head housed multiple rows of crystalline teeth that refracted light in nauseating patterns, while its eyes, all 9 of them, arranged asymmetrically across its skull, burned with purple fire identical to the energy that had erupted from Babel Tower. "By the sacred pools," Nisha whispered, her desert tribe's courage momentarily shaken by the monstrosity. "The Elder's visions didn't prepare me for this." The void hound scented the air with a tongue that split into 3 serpentine appendages, each tasting the atmosphere in different directions. Its burning gaze fixed unerringly on Naruto, recognition evident even in its alien features. "Fragment," it growled, the word forming without proper vocalization, more an impression forced directly into their minds than actual sound. "Return to wholeness. The Void Lord awaits." "Not today," Naruto replied calmly, completing his sequence of hand signs. Sage Art. Barrier of the 4 harmonies. Golden energy erupted from the ground at 4 equidistant points around the amphitheater, forming pillars that shot skyward before arcing inward to create a dome-like structure. Each pillar manifested differently, one as twisting flames, another as swirling water, the third as spiraling wind, and the fourth as crystalline earth formations. Where they met overhead, the 4 elements interwove in a complex lattice that pulsed with balanced power. The Void Hound hurled itself against this barrier with surprising speed for its size, only to be repelled with a discordant sound like struck crystal. It circled the perimeter, testing for weaknesses, occasionally lunging at different sections of the barrier. "It's intelligent," Liria observed, her instruments recording the creature's behavior and energy patterns. "It's systematically evaluating the barrier's composition, looking for resonant vulnerabilities." "Can your barrier hold?" Akemi called down to Naruto, Kitsune Maru gleaming with a subtle blue light as she prepared to join the battle if necessary. "Not indefinitely," he admitted, maintaining the hand seal that powered the technique. "This is a delaying tactic, not a permanent solution." The Void Hound seemed to understand his words. It backed away from the barrier, lowering its misshapen head as the shadows comprising its body began to churn and writhe with increased intensity. Purple fire in its eyes brightened to painful brilliance. "It's concentrating its dimensional manipulation," Liria warned, reading from her instruments. Creating a focused point of. The creature released a beam of concentrated void energy from its primary maw, striking the barrier at the exact junction between fire and earth elements. The impact sent visible shockwaves throughout the golden lattice. Clever, Naruto muttered through gritted teeth, the strain of maintaining the barrier now evident on his face. It identified the harmonic weak point. The Void Hound continued its assault, each blast more precisely targeted than the last. Cracks began appearing in the barrier's structure, golden light leaking through like solar flares. We need to help him, Akemi decided, leaping due WN from her elevated position to land beside Naruto. What can we do? The barrier follows elemental principles, Liria called, hurrying over with one of her instruments in hand. If we could reinfo RCE the harmonic resonance at the junction points. We'd need elemental affinities we don't possess, Naruto interrupted, sweat beading on his forehead from the sustained effort. This technique draws on natural energy that. I can help, Nisha interjected unexpectedly. When they all looked at her in surprise, she explained, shadow isn't absence, it's the boundary where light meets darkness. Why tribes' techniques manipulate that boundary? She resheathed one dagger and extended her free hand. Let me strengthen the junctions. Naruto studied her briefly before giving a short nod. Place our hand on my shoulder and channel your energy through me. I'll integrate it into the barrier matrix. As Nisha complied, Akemi frowned in concern. You're trusting her. She tried to kill you less than an hour ago. She's had multiple opportunities to let me die since then, Naruto pointed out reasonably. Including right now by simply doing nothing. Outside the barrier, the Void Hound intensified its assault, seemingly aware of their attempt to reinforce the protection. Its attacks now concentrated on a single point, the purple energy beginning to penetrate the weakening structure. It's breaking through, Liria warned, her instruments emitting urgent alarms. Everyone, prepare for combat, Naruto instructed, his voice steady despite the strain evident on his features. When the barrier falls, the creature will target me first. Use that moment to strike at its flanks, particularly the joint where the middle and rear legs connect. That's where its dimensional anchoring is weakest. How do you know that? Nisha asked, even as she channeled her shadow energy through his shoulder, the effort causing the ritual scars on her face to stand out stark against her bronze skin. Because I've fought their kind before, he replied grimly, in another life. Before anyone could question this cryptic statement, the barrier shattered with a sound like 1,000 crystal goblets breaking simultaneously. Shards of golden energy rained down around them, dissipating before reaching the ground. The Void Hound leapt forward with impossible speed, its multiple legs carrying it directly toward Naruto. True to his prediction, the creature ignored the others entirely, its focus absolute. Naruto met the charge head-on, his hands forming new seals even as he dodged the creature's initial lunge. Wind style. Pressure damage. A concentrated blast of compressed air struck the Void Hound's head, forcing it sideways and momentarily disrupting its attack. The creature recovered quickly, however, one of its serpentine tongues lashing out to wrap around Naruto's ankle. The joint, he shouted to the others, already being dragged toward the creature's crystalline maw. Strike now. Akemi reacted first, Kitsune Maru's blade glowing with intense blue energy as she executed a perfect diagonal slash across the indicated weak point. The Void Hound released a mind-piercing shriek, momentarily releasing Naruto as it twisted to snap at this new threat. Nisha seized the opportunity, shadow walking to appear directly beneath the creature. Her poisoned dagger plunged upward into the same joint Akemi had struck, the blade sinking to its hilt in the churning darkness of the hound's body. My poison has no effect, she called in alarm, narrowly avoiding a crushing paw as she rolled away. It's not biologically alive, it doesn't need to be, Liria shouted, her academic reserve giving way to urgent instruction. Your blade creates a physical anchor point. Hold position. The researcher had abandoned her instruments to extract a small crystalline device from her pack. She aimed it at Nisha's embedded dagger, making rapid adjustments to controls along its side. Harmonic resonance amplifier, she explained quickly to Naruto, who had regained his footing. It can create a localized energy cascade using an existing metallic conductor. Understanding flashed across his features. Akemi, strike your sword against Nisha's dagger, full force. The Shrine Maiden didn't hesitate, leaping into position with perfect timing as the Void Hound twisted to free itself from the embedded blade. Kitsune Maru, still glowing with that distinctive blue energy, connected with the hilt of Nisha's dagger just as Liria activated her device. The effect was spectacular and immediate. The resonance created a chain reaction that ripped through the Void Hound's dimensional anchoring. Cracks of golden light spread throughout its shadowy form, the competing frequencies tearing apart the bonds that held it in their reality. Naruto seized the moment of vulnerability, hands flashing through a complex sequence of seals before slamming both palms against the ground. Sealing technique. Dimensional banishment. Golden energy erupted from the earth in a circular pattern centered on the creature. Unlike his previous techniques, this one didn't attempt to destroy or contain the Void Hound. Instead, it forcibly reversed the process that had brought it into their world. The creature thrashed violently as the sealing array tightened around it, its multiple eyes blazing with hatred and something that might have been fear. As its form began to warp and compress, it fixed its gaze one final time on Naruto. The Void Lord comes, it projected into their minds with terrible clarity. The 9 seals weaken, the forgotten shall remember, too late for salvation. With those ominous words echoing in their consciousness, the Void Hound imploded, collapsing into a single point of darkness that winked out of existence with a thunderous concussion that sent them all staggering backward. Silence fell over the amphitheater, broken only by their heavy breathing and the gentle burbling of the spring. Is it dead? Akemi asked finally, still gripping Kitsune Maru tightly. No, Naruto replied, his voice weary as the glow of power faded from his eyes. Banished back to its own dimensional plane. It can't return without significant external assistance, which buys us time. Remarkable teamwork, Liria observed, already making notes in her ever-present journal despite the lingering danger. The combination of shadow anchoring, spiritual resonance from the sword, technological amplification, and your sealing technique created a harmonic convergence that temporarily belies the dimensional boundary while simultaneously generating enough repulsive force to. Perhaps the theoretical analysis could wait until we're certain no more void entities are immediately forthcoming. Akemi suggested with strained politeness. Liria looked up, blinking as if suddenly remembering their situation. Oh, yes, of course. Practical concerns first. Naruto moved to check on Nisha, who had retrieved her dagger but remained unusually quiet after the battle. Are you all right? The desert assassin met his gaze with troubled eyes. The creature's final message. It matches the conclusion of my tribe's prophecy. The forgotten shall remember, too late for salvation. She studied his face with new intensity. What are you forgetting, sage? And why does the void fear your remembrance? That, said a melodic voice from the canyon's entrance, is precisely what I've come to discover. All 4 turned sharply toward the unexpected intrusion. Standing at the amphitheater's southern edge, framed by the golden light of the setting sun, was a woman of such breathtaking beauty that she seemed almost unreal, as if the concept of perfection had decided to take human form. Her hair cascaded in elegant waves around a face of flawless symmetry, while eyes like quicksilver surveyed them with ancient intelligence at odds with her apparent youth. Freya, Naruto breathed, cognition and something deeper flashing across his features. The goddess smiled, the expression transforming her already stunning countenance into something almost painfully beautiful. Hello, old friend. It's been millennia since we spoke properly. She glided forward with inhuman grace, her silver dress somehow untouched by the dust and grime of travel. Though I suspect only one of us remembers our last conversation. Akemi and Liria immediately dropped to one knee, recognizing a deity of Freya's stature. Even Nisha, whose desert tribe acknowledged few gods beyond their own ancestral spirits, lowered her head respectfully. Naruto alone remained standing, his expression a complex mixture of emotions that shifted too quickly to identify. You shouldn't have come, he said finally. It isn't safe. Freya's perfect lips curved into an amused smile. For me, or for you. She approached until she stood directly before him, close enough that anyone watching could see the stark contrast. Between them, her divine perfection against his mortal appearance, her silver radiance against his golden warmth. The void entities are growing bolder, breaking through with increasing frequency. The barriers weaken faster than anticipated. You remember, Naruto stated rather than asked, something like hope flickering in his ancient eyes. Fragments only, she admitted, reaching out to trace the whisker marks on his cheek with delicate fingers. Enough to know that we once stood together in the divine realm. Enough to recognize your soul when it blazed like a sun beneath Orario. Her silver eyes held his steadily. Enough to understand that what's happening now echoes a catastrophe from before recorded history. The simple touch of her fingers against his cheek triggered something profound. Naruto's eyes widened, pupils dilating as if seeing something beyond the physical realm. His breathing quickened, body tensing as if fighting some internal battle. Naruto, Akemi called in alarm, starting forward only to be restrained by Nisha's quick hand on her arm. Don't interrupt, the desert assassin warned quietly. This is beyond us. Freya maintained the contact, her divine PR essence intensifying subtly. Not the overwhelming power gods could unleash, but something more focused, more deliberate. Remember, she whispered, the word carrying weight beyond its simple meaning. Remember who you were, who we were to each other. The air between them shimmered with unseen energy, golden and silver light intertwining in patterns too complex for mortal perception. For those watching, it appeared as if reality itself held its breath, waiting. Then, with a gasp that seemed torn from the depths of his being, Naruto staggered backward. His eyes, now glowing with golden light, spilled outward like solar flares, fixed on Freya with new recognition. The Council of Nine, he said hoarsely, the words emerging as if from long-buried memory. The Covenant of Realms, the first descent. His hands reached up to grasp his head as if physically containing the rush of returning knowledge. We argued. You wanted to descend with the others, to walk among mortals. I warned against it. Yes, Freya encouraged, maintaining her distance now but her silver eyes never leaving his face. The first gods were growing restless in the divine realm. I advocated for descent, for experiencing the mortal condition directly rather than merely observing from afar. But I knew the risks, Naruto continued, fragments of memory crystallizing into coherence. Descending would require limitations, safeguards to prevent divine power from destroying the very realm we sought to experience. I argued that some should remain to maintain the barriers between dimensions. You were outvoted, Freya said softly. All chose to descend save you. The golden light in Naruto's eyes pulsed brighter. Not all. One remained with me. My counterpart. My balance. His expression darkened suddenly. Erebus. The Void Lord. A shudder ran through the canyon at the name, as if reality itself recoiled from its utterance. The spring's gentle flow momentarily stilled before resuming with greater urgency. Yes, Freya confirmed, her perfect features grave. While the rest of us descended, taking new names and forms among mortals, you and Erebus remained as guardians of the cosmic balance, light and void, creation and dissolution. The fundamental duality that underpins existence itself. But something went wrong, Naruto whispered, pain evident in his voice as these memories surfaced. Erebus changed. The solitude of guardianship twisted him. He began to see mortal realms not as something to protect but as a failed experiment to be terminated. And when you opposed him, Freya continued, her voice gentle but insistent, when you defended what we had abandoned to our own pursuits, he turned against you directly. The war of primal forces began. Naruto's legs gave way beneath him as the full weight of these memories crashed through his consciousness. He sank to his knees on the canyon floor, golden energy now visibly coursing through his entire body, not just beneath his skin but occasionally breaking through. Like a vessel struggling to contain its contents. I couldn't defeat him, he said, the words emerging as a mixture of remembered anguish and dawning comprehension. We were too evenly matched. Perfect counterpoints in the cosmic design. Every victory I achieved, he balanced with an equal defeat. Realms shattered in our conflict, countless lives lost as collateral damage in a war between forces never meant to oppose each other. Freya knelt before him, her divine dignity set aside in favor of unexpected gentleness. And so you made a choice that none of us foresaw. A sacrifice beyond our comprehension. The 9 seals, Naruto confirmed, his voice stronger now as understanding solidified. I couldn't defeat Erebus through opposition, that would only perpetuate the cycle of destruction. Instead, I created a binding that would contain us both. 9 sacred sites across the mortal realm, each housing a fragment of my power and a corresponding portion of his. You divided your divine essence, Liria whispered in sudden understanding, academic curiosity overwhelming proper reverence. Distributed it to maintain balanced containment at multiple anchor points. Yes, Naruto acknowledged, glancing at the researcher with faint surprise, as if momentarily forgetting he had an audience. But the binding required a final component. One consciousness had to remain vigilant, adapting to changes in the mortal realm that might disrupt the seals. Erebus was too corrupted to trust with this task. So you bound your own divinity, Freya finished, her silver eyes reflecting complex emotions. Fragmented your consciousness and incarnated in mortal form, living countless lives across millennia, always retaining just enough of your true nature to respond when the barriers weakened. But never enough to risk releasing your full power prematurely. Naruto nodded slowly, his gaze turning inward as he integrated these restored memories with his current identity. I designed the seals to weaken gradually, allowing my consciousness to reintegrate over time. When fully restored, I would possess the knowledge and power to implement a permanent solution. But something has accelerated the process, Akemi interjected, understanding now why her shrine's barrier had failed so catastrophically. The seals are failing faster than designed. Bus has influence even within his containment, Naruto confirmed grimly, rising unsteadily to his feet. Over thousands of years, he's found ways to reach out, subtle at first, then with growing effect. The aberrations we've encountered are manifestations of that influence, drawn to the fragments of my consciousness as I begin to remember. Nisha's amber eyes narrowed in thought. Then the prophecy my tribe received. When it showed devastation following in your wake, it showed the consequence of these entities tracking me as I move between the seal sites, Naruto finished for her. Your elders interpreted my presence as causation rather than correlation. He turned to Akemi. That's why reaching your shrine is crucial. The eastern seal contains the primary memory repository, knowledge. I intentionally stored separate from my consciousness for safekeeping, including how to repair the failing seals. Liria asked, already calculating possibilities. Or how to complete the reintegration safely, Freya suggested, her gaze never leaving Naruto's face. To reclaim what was divided and face Erebus with your full power restored. Naruto met her silver eyes, something unspoken passing between them. That was always the eventual goal, he acknowledged quietly. The seals were a temporary solution, designed to last until I could develop a permanent one. And have you? Freya pressed, her melodic voice carrying an edge of urgency. In your countless mortal incarnations, wandering between the seal sites, have you discovered what eluded you before the binding? I don't know yet, he admitted. Frustration evident in his tone. Critical pieces remain locked in the repositories. What I've remembered so far is primarily context, not solution. Freya studied him for a long moment before coming to a decision. From within her silver dress, she withdrew a small platinum medallion inlaid with opalescent stone that shifted colors like the northern lights. Then perhaps this will help, she said, offering it to him. A divine artifact I brought from the upper realm, one of few permitted under the Descent Covenant. It's called the Resonance Key. Naruto stared at the medallion with evident recognition. You kept it all this time. Without understanding its significance until recently, she confirmed. It awakened when you sealed the breach at Babel Tower, responding to your energy signature. He accepted the medallion cautiously, his fingers brushing against hers in the exchange. The moment of contact sent visible ripples through the air around them, golden and silver energy intertwining briefly before subsiding. With this, he said quietly, I can access the sealed memories at each site without triggering catastrophic energy release. He looked up at her with newfound intensity. You've kept your promise, after all these millennia. Promise, Akemi echoed, clearly struggling to process these revelations about the sage she had pledged to serve. Freya's perfect lips curved in a smile that somehow conveyed both triumph and vulnerability. Before the descent, before the war with Erebus, we made a pact. If ever we were separated, by circumstance, by choice, by cosmic design itself, we would find each other again. Her silver eyes held Naruto's steadily. No matter how many lives, no matter how many millennia, some bonds transcend even divine covenant. The implications of this statement hung in the air between them, charged with emotions too complex and ancient for simple categorization. For a moment, the goddess of beauty and desire appeared. Almost mortal in her unveiled feelings, a glimpse of the being she had been before descent, before taking on the archetypal role that now defined her. Naruto's response was prevented by a sudden tremor that shook the canyon walls. Small stones and dust showered down from above as the ground vibrated beneath their feet. The dimensional boundary remains unstable after the Void Hound's banishment, Liria warned. Her instruments emitting urgent signals. We should relocate before. A second, stronger tremor cut off her recommendation. Cracks appeared in the canyon walls, spreading like lightning bolts through the ancient stone. The entire area is destabilizing, Naruto announced, pocketing the medallion and immediately shifting to crisis management. Freya, you should return to Orario. The Divine Covenant provides additional protection. The goddess looked momentarily offended at the suggestion. I didn't track you across half the realm to retreat at the first sign of danger. Besides, she added with a knowing smile, the Covenant's restrictions apply differently to me where you're concerned. Before he could question this cryptic statement, a third tremor, more violent than the previous two combined, sent larger rocks tumbling from the canyon walls. A fissure opened in the ground near the spring, releasing a plume of vapor that carried an acrid, sulfurous scent. No time to argue, Naruto decided. Everyone, gather close. I'm teleporting us out. Conventional teleportation magic doesn't work during dimensional instability, Liria protested even as she hurriedly collected her equipment. The coordinate mapping becomes unreliable when spatial parameters fluctuate. This isn't conventional magic, Naruto assured her, forming a series of hand signs. It's a dire, court manipulation of space-time coordinates using natural energy as a stabilizing medium. They clustered around him, Akemi with grim determination, Nisha with cautious acceptance, Liria with barely concealed scientific excitement despite the danger, and Freya with serene confidence, as if the idea of reality collapsing around them was a minor inconvenience at most. As Naruto completed the final hand sign, the canyon walls began to collapse inward. The last thing any of them saw before golden light enveloped them was a glimpse of something massive and formless beginning to materialize where the Void Hound had been banished. A churning darkness shot through with purple lightning that seemed to reach toward them with malevolent purpose. Then reality shifted, compressed, and redistributed around them. The sensation was not unlike being simultaneously stretched and compressed in directions that human perception wasn't designed to process. Liria might have been delighted to analyze the experience under less urgent circumstances. When the golden light faded and solid reality reasserted itself, they stood on a forested mountainside overlooking a vast expanse of wilderness. The afternoon's uncast long shadows across the landscape, while in the far distance, snow-capped peaks pierced the horizon. The eastern highlands, Akemi identified immediately, turning to orient herself. Were less than 2 days' journey from the shrine. She looked at Naruto with new respect. That kind of distance in a single teleportation is extremely taxing, he finished for her, swaying slightly before steadying himself. Especially with passengers. Freya moved to his side, her divine presence somehow both supportive and restrained. You're pushing the limitations of your current form, she observed. Concern evident beneath her composed exterior. The memory integration strains your mortal vessel. A calculated risk, he replied, straightening with visible effort. We need to reach the eastern shrine before Erebus identifies which seal site we're targeting. He doesn't know, Nisha asked, scanning their new surroundings with professional assessment. Not specifically, Naruto explained. He can sense my movements in general terms but not precise destinations. The ceiling was designed that way. Each site is partially obscured from his perception, creating a defensive network. Fascinating redundancy principle, Liria noted, already documenting their experience in her journal. Mutual obscuration creating a sum greater than its parts. We should establish camp, Akemi suggested practically. Night falls quickly in the highlands, and the forest harbors its own dangers after dark. As they began preparing a defensible position among the trees, Naruto found himself momentarily alone with Freya. The goddess studied him with silver eyes that seemed to see beyond his physical form to the fragmented divinity struggling to reintegrate within. You remember more than you've shared with them, she observed quietly. About us. About what happened before the ceiling. Naruto hesitated, conflict evident in his expression. Some memories are clearer than others, he acknowledged finally. Our connection. is among the more distinct. And yet you hesitate to acknowledge it fully. Her perfect features revealed no hurt, only patient curiosity. Why? He glanced toward their companions. Busy with camp preparations. Because I'm not certain which memories are truly mine and which might be aspirational reconstruction. Because I don't know if what existed Enos before can, or should, exist again in this reality. You fear attachment while your conflict with Erebus remains unresolved, Freya surmised with unexpected insight. You worry that connections, to others, to me, might compromise the decisions you'll need to make. Something like that, he admitted, surprised by her perception. The last time, I chose a solution that separated me from everything and everyone I knew. If the circumstances demand similar sacrifice again. Freya stepped closer, her divine presence enveloping him like a tangible force. Last time, you faced the choice alone. This time, you won't. She reached up to touch his face again, the contact sending visible ripples of silver and gold energy across his skin. Some bonds can't be broken, Sage. Not by time, not by cosmic forces. Not even by your own design. Before he could respond, she leaned forward and pressed her lips to his, a kiss as gentle as it was deliberate. The contact sparked an immediate reaction. Golden light blazing beneath his skin while silver radiance emanated from her. Where the energies met, reality itself seemed to vibrate in harmonic resonance. Freya stepped back, satisfaction evident in her expression as she observed the effect. You see, some connections transcend even the barriers you created. Naruto stood momentarily speechless, new memories cascading through his consciousness. Fragments of a relationship that had spanned eons, evolved through cosmic upheavals, and persisted despite separation on a scale mortals couldn't comprehend. That was not entirely fair, he managed finally. Though a reluctant smile tugged at his lips. I am the goddess of desire, she reminded him with elegant simplicity. Fairness has never been my domain. Her silver eyes softened unexpectedly. But loyalty is. Whatever happens at the Eastern Shrine, whatever memories you recover there, know this, I did not track you across the realm merely from divine curiosity or ancient obligation. Then why? He asked, though something in his expression suggested he already knew the answer. Freya's smile held millennia of secrets and surprising vulnerability. Because some patterns repeat across all existences. Mortal and divine alike. Because even gods can learn, can change, can, she paused, selecting her words with uncharacteristic care, can discover that possessing something is far less satisfying than standing beside it as it shines. With that enigmatic statement, she turned and glided toward the others, her silver dress catching the dying sunlight like liquid moonbeams. Naruto watched her go, one hand unconsciously rising to touch his lips where the contact still resonated through his fragmenting consciousness. Complicated, came a dry voice from behind him. He turned to find Nisha leaning against a nearby tree, arms crossed and amber eyes evaluating him with sardonic amusement. How long have you been there? He asked, neither embarrassed nor defensive. Long enough to witness a reunion several millennia in the making, she replied with a shrug. My tribe's histories speak of the gods before descent, of their passions and conflicts that shaped the earliest foundations of reality. I never expected to see evidence of those accounts firsthand. Naruto studied the desert assassin with new curiosity. Your tribe remembers more than most. We remember because we were tasked with remembering, she said simply. Just as the Eastern Shrine was tasked with preserving knowledge, my people were charged with preserving context, the histories between the histories. The spaces between recorded events. By whom? He asked, though his expression suggested emerging recognition. Nisha's lips curved in a knowing smile. By you, of course. Before the binding, before you fragmented your consciousness, you established custodians throughout the mortal realm, insurance against total forgetting. Her amber eyes held his steadily. My ancestors swore to my Ntain these memories until the time of your return. That oath has shaped our entire civilization for thousands of years. Then why did your tribe interpret the prophecy as a warning against me? Because prophecy without context becomes distortion, she replied. Over millennia, some original meanings were lost, interpretations shifted. When the sacred pools showed devastation following in your wake, our elders feared the worst, that your return signaled catastrophe rather than salvation. Understanding dawned in Naruto's expression. So you were sent to kill me based on a misinterpreted fragment of the very history your tribe was meant to preserve. Ironic, Nisha acknowledged with a wry twist of her lips. Though perhaps not entirely coincidental. Erebus has influence even in containment, as you said. Perhaps the misinterpretation itself was his doing, subtle corruption introduced over centuries to turn your own safeguards against you. This possibility clearly troubled Naruto. If he could influence your tribe's prophecies, then no repository is entirely secure, Nisha finished for him. Even your eastern shrine may contain compromised knowledge. The implications hung between them as the forest darkened with approaching night. In the camp clearing, Akemi had started a small fire while Liria arranged her instruments in a monitoring perimeter. Freya sat with regal posture on a fallen log, her divine presence somehow enhancing rather than diminishing the natural beauty of their surroundings. We should join the others, Naruto said finally. Tomorrow's journey will be challenging, especially if Erebus has indeed corrupted aspects of what awaits us. Nisha nodded, pushing away from the tree with fluid grace. For what it's worth, she added as they walked toward the camp. My attempt to kill you was genuine. But so is my current commitment to your cause. Her amber eyes reflected the distant firelight. My tribe may have forgotten parts of our purpose. But I haven't forgotten mine, to preserve truth, even when it contradicts established belief. A rare quality in any realm, mortal or divine, Naruto observed with appreciation. Thank you for your honesty, Nisha Shadow Trace. Save your thanks until we reach the shrine, she advised pragmatically. If your memories there reveal a truth none of us are prepared to face, honesty may become the least comfortable virtue. With that sobering observation, they rejoined the others around the campfire. As night descended fully upon the eastern highlands, 5 disparate individuals, a forgotten god slowly remembering his divinity. A goddess of desire with unexpected depths, a shrine maiden bound by ancient duty, a scholar driven by insatiable curiosity, and an assassin whose purpose had transformed from ending a life to preserving truth, gathered in the fragile circle of light and warmth. Beyond the firelight's reach, darkness pressed close, not the natural darkness of wilderness night, but something deeper and more purposeful. In that darkness, points of purple light occasionally flickered like distant lightning, waiting for the moment when the sage would reach his destination and unlock the very memories that Erebus, Lord of the Void, had worked millennia to corrupt. The true battle had not yet begun. Chapter 3 End. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.